And now it should be an option for decision makers here in the United States and elsewhere. Among other options, well, we need to plan for the possibility. In my head, it's more than a possibility, it's the likelihood. Frankly, I don't even want to think about it as regime change, it's regime end that we're after. And that should now be a serious policy consideration. And what people in diaspora can do is to make sure that it's a viable option for American policymakers, that it's thought of that way, that it's built that way. And one of the things that I think can be analytically presented as a case for regime end is what are the costs of continuing this path that we've been on if we get to Khamenei 2.0 or regime 2.0. What are the costs of that? And what are the costs of completely making sure that there is no continuation of that the alternate path is toward enabling and empowering the Iranian people to do what they're capable of doing to become a good friend of the American people and of democracy around the world. We know, we've talked about all of the economic possibilities, certainly cultural and diplomatic, but America has a lot to gain with a democratic, prosperous Iran. As we embark on a technological revolution, Iran has a lot to offer the United States and other democracies in terms of resources, talent, know-how. A country of 90 million, I don't know if all of them are engineers, but a lot of them are engineers. Has a lot to offer the world in terms of building the kind of future that is compatible with all of our values. So I think, practically speaking, we can play a part in presenting an option to the U.S. government and governments around the world as to the alternative, as to the post-regime alternative. Practically speaking, what that looks like, how much that's going to cost versus the cost of enabling the same set of threats that come from the regime as it is right now. How much does it cost to have to spend time and resources and all sorts of efforts to keep an unstable terrorist regime in power and not know when it's going to destabilize the world versus putting the kind of conditions in place and the kind of more predictable situation in place that's going to benefit the American national interest and the national interest of the free world. I think we have to stop thinking of this as a subject that we can talk about. I think President Trump introduced this topic, and I think we should seize the opportunity and do the kind of work necessary to make it into a tangible option and opportunity for the U.S. and the world. And look, right now, beyond the Iranian people, there's only one country that is trying to shape what happens after the regime ends, and that's Israel. Israel is the only country that is proactively Israel is the only country that is today unapologetically trying to shape the future, not only in their own self-interest, not only in the interest of the Iranian people, but in the interest of the free world. Imagine if the United States and other democracies banded together with Israel and have, through I would say beyond maximum pressure, through excruciating pressure, unbearable pressure, and other means, have made the decision for the world, which made the regime impossible to continue. And I think that is in the realm of possibility. I think Israel has shown the way. And, whether there's a political will to act on this is up to governments and decision makers around the world. But we know now that it's possible. We know now the emperor has no clothes. We know now that it's up to us to decide the future, whether it's going to be the future of uncertainty and destabilization and constant IAEA negotiations and JCPOA 34.0, or we're going to redesign the future, which we know now we are in much stronger position to do now that the regime has no leverage whatsoever to continue surviving. So if it does survive, it's only going to be because all of us threw it another undeserved lifeline, which is going to prop it up in power, but it certainly doesn't deserve it. It's certainly not an option that makes any sense for us. And I think we need to make a decision and seize this moment in time and decide that the 46th year of the regime is the last year, and the future is going to be 180 degrees different.
Thank you, Len. Benham, I would love your take on the original question, but Len made two important points I'd like to hear first. One, that President Trump broke the taboo of talking about regime change. I would say that's something Nufti and Cameron and everyone here has been working on for years. Do you agree that that taboo has been broken, first of all? And then second of all, on the comment about the cost of change versus the cost of stasis, how can the U.S. government evaluate that and come to a real conclusion? I know our thoughts, but how can they do that?
Sure. So just first to the heart of the original question, when the Islamic Republic is offering you being in this audience and also Western policymakers, the evolution option, what it is banking on is you not being able to make both the financial consideration as well as the strategic and political consideration that Len charged you with here today. It's assuming that you will not draw up the ledger needed, and instead it is offering you what we call a path of least resistance. It is offering you an alternative, which is to continue some variant of the 4+ decade ups and downs of U.S., European, Western containment policy. The West has basically had different iterations of one policy: containment, rollback, isolation, hoping to force change, but not willing to spend time and money and assets in a measurable, meaningful way. Sometimes because, we have to be honest, policymakers don't see a light at the end of the tunnel. Policymakers don't see a winning strategy, and they don't see one that they can achieve on their own limited time in office. This is the real world we're talking about here. These are how decisions are actually made. And we actually have to impact this calculus. And doing a real balance sheet saying, I don't think it's cheaper for a tin pot dictator to be able to credibly threaten the life of a sitting U.S. president. I don't think that makes it cheaper for anybody. I don't think it makes it cheaper where every single U.S. president after George W. Bush has come into office saying we'll do less in the Middle East, and then ends up being forced to spend more time, more capital, more resources, both in blood and in treasure, to actually have to do more to counter and contain the Islamic Republic of Iran. So whether you're counting carrier strike groups or missile defense assets in the region, these are all things that need to go very much into that calculation that Len was just mentioning. And on regime change or different iterations of this word, I hate to be the bearer of bad news. I still think it's treated in this town like beyond a political third rail. The president said something online, and I think it was true for that moment in time. The charge is up to you to make it sticky, to not make it something that slips away and was ignored on social media. The charge is actually up to you to make sure folks in Congress actually can get out ahead of this issue, can actually build a constituency on this issue, can actually fundraise on this issue, can actually win with this issue. This is the democratic process. This is the test case to see if you can take legitimate action, legally, politically available to you in really the world's most robust democracy today.
Can I just add one thing? So I think it was brilliant for President Trump to use the term regime change. The image of Saddam Hussein looking like a disheveled madman coming out of a spider hole. Or when I was at the Pentagon, I saw a photograph that I don't think was ever made public of Osama bin Laden's head that had been shot off. The top of it was removed, and the SEAL team was instructed to eliminate him that way so that his facial features were not damaged, so he can be identified very clearly. I think it was a great move to use the term. I do believe, however, that regime change, it does have a very dirty word. People think about what happened in Iraq and Afghanistan, boots on the ground. None of us should hang our hopes on that. I also think that we need to be very sober about what to expect from the U.S. government. I believe, from experience, that the real strategic planning effort must be done with us. It's not being done in the U.S. government. It's so complicated. It's difficult. Earlier this year, the only Office of Net Assessment in the whole Pentagon was dissolved. In the U.S. government, it was dissolved in the Pentagon. That long-range strategic planning, complicated scenarios, looking at the messiness of regime transitions, building new countries. This is not being done in the U.S. government. It must be done with you.
I love the image, and I haven't seen that image.
I don't think it's public.
No, but in my mind, it's public. The lobotomized bin Laden.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to think about that one, and I'm going to think about Tucker Carlson sending condolences to his family, and that picture in my mind. I think the bigger issue here is, I think you have to recognize that there is no appetite in the United States today, after 20 years of being bogged down in Iraq and Afghanistan, to do anything comparable. And, Adam is correct. That is the reality, and that's not going to change. But the opportunity is, and I've experienced this firsthand in my conversations with a lot of people in Congress and policymaking circles, I don't think enough people understand the difference between Iran and Iraq. I don't think enough people understand the nuances and the calculations at play. Not to say that anyone is asking for American boots on the ground. Not even the Iranian people are asking for American boots on the ground. Yet the visual of what we've done in 20 years in Iraq and Afghanistan is associated with American boots on the ground. That is not what is being contemplated. That is not what's going to be necessary. I think the conversation is more analogous to me. Again, I have a personal experience with how it felt to be on the other side of the Iron Curtain in the Soviet Union. I don't think any dissidents in the Soviet Union expected America to invade Russia or the Soviet Union at the time. But as Sharansky has said, all of the people behind the Iron Curtain were emboldened. Their backbone was stiffened when they heard words of support and actual assistance in different ways, both from government and well-meaning private citizens, to sympathize with their cause, to stand with them, to make it clear that the evil empire is evil. That, when Sharansky was in his solitary cell and Reagan's words reached him, he felt stronger than his oppressors. And that the more that we can, and this is the least we can do, the least each of us can do, and the least any democratic government can do, is offer that to the Iranian people, the Venezuelan people, and any other people struggling to be free. They're no less deserving of freedom than we are here in America. But there's more that we could do, whether it's the things that we've been trying to do in terms of supplying communications channels, Starlink, and all sorts of assistance. All of those things should be on the table, and more. But I think it's important to stay the course. Maximum pressure, excruciating pressure is a policy that's valid. We saw what could be accomplished with just the United States putting pressure on the regime in Iran. Just the United States brought Iran to within, a few months of collapse, in my mind. I think if President Trump won in 2020, I think that it was months away from collapsing. I think they were down to like $4 billion in foreign cash reserves, and which was less than Afghanistan, to put it in perspective. So there's a lot that the United States can do, and together, if all democracies band together and stay the course and call evil evil, and stops throwing the regime a lifeline, I think it will make it easier for the Iranian people to put the finishing touches on the regime, and then, you know, the world changes that day, and you know, everything that we've been talking about and dreaming about is going to happen, and it doesn't have to require American or any other boots on the ground. The Iranian people are ready. All they need is emotional, financial, and communications support to do what they know how to do themselves.
Thanks. I think redefining regime change, as you mentioned, is a key goal for everyone in this room, and especially the diaspora, explaining that Iran is not, my colleague Timans and I had an op-ed a couple weeks ago, Iran is not Iraq. So I think explaining that repeatedly is very important. To end this, hopefully on a happier note or a more positive note, or maybe a charge to the community or anyone else, do you think the death of Khamenei, if the regime hasn't collapsed yet, will be the best chance for the regime change that we're talking about? And whether yes or no, do you think it would be the last chance for the type of regime change that we're talking about? Behnam, please.
Just on the charge to the community point, I think this point may have been lost in the weeds, but when I say that you can help folks build a constituency around this, when I explain the democratic process and how to build winning coalitions and to really win on this issue, it is to be honest about some of the similarities that do exist in the minds of American policymakers today between Iran and Iraq. But then it is to talk about the unique history of Iran versus Iraq. And for the policymaker, your job is to elaborate and say, here is the difference between foreign imposed regime change versus foreign supported regime change. That's the universe of difference. Foreign imposed versus foreign supported. I've said this before, so I'll say it again. We are right by the White House. There is a park right by the White House with 5 statues. 4 of them are foreigners. And those 4 that are foreigners helped with the founding of this country. So this isn't about making you less of a nationalist or about foreign interference, okay? This is about taking your country back and, dare I say, making Iran great again. That is the charge to the community. Now, you asked an analytical question about Khamenei, and I'm someone who tends to lean a little bit more on the risk-averse side, and this is what I fear, that if these steps are not taken now in the time that Khamenei is still the Middle East's longest-serving autocrat, the Islamic Republic will be more able to present you with the Evolution 2.0 framework. It'll be easier because, you know what? DC is not having a conversation about regime change, but you know who is talking about regime change? The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. You know who is talking about regime change? In so many ways, Rouhani. In so many ways, Tajzadeh. In so many ways, these people and institutions that we don't like and that we don't think would be the best advocate of the Iranian national interest, that we don't think would be a good bridge builder with the Arabs in the region or with Israel or with America or with Western Europe or with anybody else. So therefore, it is up to us to act earlier. Yes, the death of Khamenei, given his institutionalization and centralization of power and his unfortunate political success at being the Middle East's longest-serving autocrat in the contemporary period, means that his death is more of an inflection point than ever before. But just because it's more of an inflection point than ever before does not allow folks to rest on their laurels and say that it's a one-bullet state. Because those forces who are talking about change, I'm not talking about the population, I'm talking about the elites and the moneyed and the vested interests that have helped make the Islamic Republic be able to sustain wave after wave of max pressure or supports or anything else that has been going on. It is them who are jockeying and talking about regime change, and your conversation needs to be louder and more realistic about it. So certainly his death is an inflection point, but it's an inflection point that we can't rest on our laurels on and that we can't miss, because their alternative will be, well, here's the path of least resistance. You had containment before, just settle for it again.
Final words, please.
Just 1 second. So I really think there's like sort of 2 critical things that the U.S. could do right now. And I think these are in President Trump's instincts, was really just to focus, again, not on the tactical, internal, maneuverings within the regime, but the illegitimacy of the regime itself. Just no matter what they do, they're illegitimate. They've failed. Number 1. Number 2 is to look at the history. Len mentioned Natan Sharansky. This is the Reagan era. What ultimately convinced Reagan to pursue this forward strategy that brought down the Soviet Union is that his top advisors had put the time and effort into crafting really professional, professional grade strategies. They gave him the confidence that there was enough sort of, fiber and connective tissue in this vision that could actually be implemented. This is what really, convinced President Reagan to give the go-ahead. I think that, any leader will want to see that those who are advocating for some great, effort, like we are here, have really thought this through and done the analysis, done the assessments, and understand the governing dynamics of what we're going to be faced in the future.
Since we have no time left, I say, who cares about Khamenei? He is irrelevant. He's yesterday's news. He's on, this close to the ash heap of history. I think there are things we control and things we don't control. And if I were the Iranian people and the people who care about the Iranian people, I think it's time to unite behind His Royal Highness Reza Pahlavi. I think the choice is clear. There's darkness and there's light. There's terrorism and then there's peace. There's goodwill and then there's hatred and destruction. So I say to anyone within, within the earshot is that let's stop thinking about what the bad guys are doing and focus on what we can do to enact the kind of change that we want. And the opportunity to line up behind a leader who represents the kind of values and the kind of future that the Iranian people deserve is right in front of us. The Iranian people know this. There is good reason to believe that thousands of regime officials are defecting. They know the end is near. So let's stop imagining all sorts of scenarios that have never come true, that the regime is going to change its DNA. It never will. And that 2.0, 3.0, or 7.0 is not going to be beneficial to the United States, to the free world, or the Iranian people. And let's stop waiting for the forces of nature and forces of history to do the work for us and help the Iranian people to get behind a leader who's capable of bringing this change. And let's get it done, before, so that Khamenei himself can see that change during his miserable life.
Thank you. Yeah, we're about 5 minutes over, and we're already about an hour over on the conference. So, thank you all for the great panel, and we got a few more. So please stick around.
Thank you to our panelists. Our next message comes from Sir Andrew Mitchell, former Secretary of State for International Development and Member of Parliament in the United Kingdom.
Hello, I am sending greetings from the home of democracy, the British Parliament in Westminster. As a former foreign minister and member of that Parliament, I know how important your struggle for freedom and democracy is, both for the people of Iran and for the wider region. Your people have shown extraordinary courage in their struggle for freedom, human rights, and a democratic future. In that struggle, they are fighting not just to free themselves, but the entire world from the scourge of this oppressive regime. I and many parliamentarians stand with you. We are committed to increasing pressure on the Islamic Republic, cutting off its ability to fund terror and providing maximum support for those seeking a free Iran. The Iranian people, not the regime, represent the future of Iran, and we will continue to support your right to decide that future.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join us in welcoming Ahmad Bahtebi, a former Iranian political prisoner.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Today we gathered at the first conference after Israel's military attack on Iran, a historic moment that has raised a big question in mind of many, especially in West. Why didn't the Iranian people didn't come in the street to overthrow the Ayatollah's regime after this attack? For those less familiar with Iran, let me be clear. The absence of protest does not mean the Iranian people's struggle is over. Their fight is a long, complex process carried out with courage and determination. In sociology, there is a concept called survival first. During war, people focus on their life. Thank you. Accept my apology. I have asthma, and I knew that I have this issue here. Thank you. Appreciate it. During war, people focus on protecting their life and families rather than political or economic demand. During the Persian Gulf War, Iraqis, under bombardment, did not protest against Saddam Hussein. They focused on staying alive. The same is true in Iran today. When the sky is filled with fighter jets and explosions echo across the cities, people think of their safety, not protest. But survival is only part of the story. While facing war from outside, the regime has intensified its crackdown inside. In the first days alone, at least 9 people were executed without fair trial. Over 1,000 were arrested and accused of spying. Many simply for filming bombed buildings and sharing them online. The parliament of the regime even passed lawmaking it easier to accuse citizens of espionage, an offense punishable by death. Beyond traditional methods like arrest, torture, and censorship, the regime now labeled opposition as a traitor to silence them through shame. It's important to note, Israel targeted nuclear and military sites it views as a threat. But those are not the tools that Ayatollah's regime used to control the people. They do not suppress people and protest with missiles and nuclear bombs. They used small arms, rifles, and pistols stored in city gardens and IRGC centers. These weapons were not destroyed, so the regime still has all these tools to control and repress the people. Even though the regime is very brutal, it has big problem. The biggest one is that people no longer trust it. For years, the regime leaders poured resources into military power, boasting of being unbeatable. Yet Israeli strike revealed Iran's sky and land to be defenseless against a country the size of one of Iran's smallest provinces. This humiliation exposed the regime weakness to Iranian people and its proxy forces. The loss of legitimacy cannot be repaired by money or propaganda. Imagine a regime that for 4 decades threatened to destroy Israel, had not even built a single public shelter, nor installed sirens, warned its citizens of incoming attack. This failure has eroded trust even among regime supporters. Today, voices within the system openly criticize the IRGC failures. Around 2 weeks ago, actually 3 weeks ago, I think it's so important we talk about that. Saeed Qassemi-Nejad talk about that. Around 3 weeks ago, for first time, Supreme Leader of Iranian demonic regime talk about an alternative for Islamic Republic. And for first time, he mentioned our King Reza Pahlavi. Why is important? Because we know that he has delusion, he has ego. Recently, many of you know that, recently he said that God talks with my mouth. The video is in internet, it's not a joke. He said that with this much delusion and ego, he couldn't ignore that and came and said there is an alternative. Why? Because right now, after 4 decades, more than 4 decades, we have an opposition with the strategy, with plan, and with the wise leader. And all of these, because Shahzad's team, we know that many people, many of you, I know that you are here, you made strong this, structure, and I appreciate you for all those things you did for our king and for Iran. Thank you so much. The Soviet Union collapsed just 2 years after its Afghanistan war, brought down by inefficiency, corruption, and past war crisis. In Iran, the same process has begun. Protests are paused by survival need, but repression, psychological collapse, loss of legitimacy, economic struggles, and global pressure are accelerating the regime decline. Crucially, the Iranian people have never given up. They know that no foreign military, no matter how much powerful, can replace the will and organization of a nation. Attack weakened the regime, sanction added pressure, but real change comes from the people. After decades of execution and suppression, Iranians have adopted a new method of resistance, boycotting election, ignoring regime symbols, and expressing defiance every day. Sorry. It's quick but powerful resistance. It's part of the process that will step by step lead to change. The Ayatollah's regime has been weakened in terms of international threat, but it still remains strong in its ability to repress the people inside the country. History reminds us, in oppressive regimes like Nazis in Germany or Soviet blocs, mass protests only erupted when people felt safety from repression. In Iran too, the people are waiting for that moment, and it is drawing closer. Ladies and gentlemen, The world most see that Iranian, even after this much pain, are still fighting. Their fight is slow, but their will is stronger than any forces of repression. We must hear their voices, stand with them, and know that the Iranian future belongs to the people who have never given up. Thank you so much.
Now, a message from Nوفدی Senior Policy Analyst Andrew Khalili for a challenge to the Iranian American community.
Hey everyone, today I want to talk a little bit about what Nوفدی has been doing on the Hill with the community and what's to come for the next year and the near future. So this year, building on the progress and the advocacy with the MASA Act, Nوفدی worked closely with Reps Jimmy Panetta and Joe Wilson to introduce the Maximum Support Act. This was a comprehensive bill that included many of the core provisions of the Nوفدی FDD Crown Prince Maximum Support Strategic Policy Initiative, including defections, internet access, etc. While this Maximum Support Act did not yet advance to the floor or to the markup vote, it has planted a flag in Congress. Maximum pressure on the oppressors, maximum support for the people. Now, working with FDD and FDD Action, because of the Max Support Act being stalled in the House a little bit, we took another step forward. We introduced 3 core provisions of the Maximum Support Act as NDAA amendments. 2 of those 3 provisions we learned today were included in the NDAA. So big progress there. Congratulations to everyone who advocated for that. This means our ideas are not just proposals anymore. They are being written into the very laws that govern the most powerful legislature in the world. And none of this happens without the diaspora, many of you here in this room. Iranian American activists are continuing to press your representatives and senators for enforcement of the MASA Act, the SHIP Act, many of the sanctions bills that were passed over the past couple of years. That pressure is ongoing, and it's the engine that's going to keep us moving. The diaspora matters because the regime's survival depends not only on repression at home, but also on disunity here and abroad. They want us divided, distracted, disengaged, and they achieved that for some time. But when we unite, as we saw with the MASA Act, we can move this legislature. Our voice is stronger than the regime's lobbyists. It's stronger than its disinformation campaigns. It's stronger than its intimidation when we are united together around these policies. Looking forward, the next Congress is going to be decisive, for us especially. We need to push for the Maximum Support Act, the next iteration of the Maximum Support Act, to advance out of committee, to get floor votes and ultimately become law. That's going to require every diaspora activist here with us and not to double down. Every interview, every op-ed, every email matters. At the same time, we need to win the enforcement fight. What I was just mentioning about the MASA and SHIP Act, surprisingly, the Trump administration has yet to enforce either of these bills. These are laws which exist at least partially, if not largely, because of our movement, and they will mean less if we don't continue fighting for their enforcement. We also face a messaging battle. As I mentioned, the regime wants Americans to believe there is no alternative, that the Iranian people are too weak and too divided both inside and outside of the country. Our job is to tell the truth. Iranians are courageous, they are organized, they have the capacity to organize, and they're hungry for freedom. And finally, unity, as I mentioned, must be the key to this strategy. We can't afford continued fragmentation. Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi's 3 principles, Iran's territorial integrity, separation of church and state, and fundamental human rights, including the right to vote, are ones we can all unite over. This year proved that when the diaspora acts, Congress will respond, but we can't stop here. The question before us is whether we'll press forward until maximum support is not just a campaign, but the settled policy of the United States. The Iranian people are risking everything on the streets of Tehran, Isfahan, Shiraz, and all across the country. The least we can do here in Washington, in Los Angeles, in London, or Berlin is risk our comfort, our time, and our energy. Thank you.
Our next presentation, Iran's Foreign Policy After the Islamic Republic, will feature a presentation of the Iran Prosperity Project's blueprint for Iran's foreign policy after the fall of the Islamic Republic and its return to the community of nations. To present the project's recommendations, please welcome Nufti Vice President Kamran Khanserinian. Kamran studied government and international relations at Harvard.
Thank you very much, Mina, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen, again for being here with us throughout the day and for the remaining few components that we have. As those of you who have come to previous Iran conferences have probably noticed, this year's differs slightly in the fact that as opposed to only having panel discussions, think tank style panel discussions, we have throughout the day presentations from the Iran Prosperity Project, or IPP, which is an initiative that at the behest and with the support of the Crown Prince, Nufti is honored to have started last year. Many of you have probably read about some of the work that IPP has done, but for those of you who are not familiar with it, the purpose of the Iran Prosperity Project is to answer resoundingly the question that there is no plan after the fall of the Islamic Republic. It is to answer the question resoundingly that if the Islamic Republic goes, there will be chaos, there will be mismanagement, there will be instability. And our objective, having put together under the leadership of a team of highly capable and talented experts, is to answer those questions and to show the international community, to show the people of Iran that there are answers to the questions that will arise immediately after the fall of the Islamic Republic. And three of those have been presented today, and tomorrow's conference will be dedicated to this topic entirely, but in Persian. The one that I will briefly present to you today is on international relations and Iran's future diplomacy after the fall of the Islamic Republic. I should say that I was not the author of this section. My friend and former colleague, Nufti Navid Mohebi, was under the guidance of several other esteemed advisors, and we continue to grow that list of advisors. And as Saeed mentioned earlier, these next 2 days mark the final few days of the 45-day open comment period that IPP and Nufti announced, such that after the emergency booklet came out in its first phase, that the public, other experts, as thousands of them have the opportunity to comment on the IPP emergency phase booklet, to improve it, to give feedback, and we are very pleased that at this point over 6,000 people from inside Iran, outside the country, have joined us in this effort, have joined IPP by trying to prepare for the day after. So for just a bit of context for all of you. So in terms of Iran's foreign policy, where are we today? This will come as no surprise to any of you who follow Iran, or even to any of you who just listened to this morning's panels. Iran's foreign policy for the past 46 years under this regime has been really signified by a series of crises. The first of which is the burden that ideology places on Iran's foreign policy. Iran's foreign policy for the past 46 years has not been the foreign policy of a normal country. It hasn't been guided by Iran's national interests or what's in the benefit of the Iranian nation state or Iranian citizens. It's been guided by what is in the personal interest of Ruhollah Khomeini and now Ali Khamenei and those series of mafia leaders around them who benefit from what they call the table of the revolution. Indeed, many of you will know that it's in the Islamic Republic's constitution. It is forced, really, to export the revolution. So it does not see itself as just being the leader of Iran or the government of Iran, but rather the government of the entire Islamic Ummat, or the Islamic nation. And so that's why it's been seen, and we've discussed this morning, to take over countries around the region, from Lebanon to Yemen to Iraq to Syria, so many more. So the first is the ideological burden placed on Iran's foreign policy by this regime. The second is, of course, as a result of that and many other factors, the isolation Iran is under. Iran, prior to the revolution, was really at a crossroads of the Middle East. Iranians traveled visa-free to hundreds of countries around the world. Iran was a hub of not only regional but global commerce and diplomacy. That has changed in the past 46 years. And of course, As we discussed on my panel with Kerry and Mark, the asymmetric dependence that this regime and its weakness have forced Iran to have on Russia and China. This is signified by things that many of you will know, this infamous 25-year deal that the Islamic Republic signed with China, signing off Iran's sovereign rights to the Chinese Communist Party, to Putin's Russia, and more. Fourth, probably most famous here in Washington, are the nuclear tensions, but the threat that the Middle East, the United States, and the world live under the threat of an Islamic Republic atomic bomb. And fifth, of course, is its proxy networks that we discussed throughout the day. So what in IPP do we seek to bring about? What do we recommend for the interim government and the future government of Iran after the fall of the Islamic Republic for its foreign policy? It's guided by four goals. The first of which is reintegration into the international community, the normalization of relations with our neighbors in the Middle East, and to bring about a balanced set of relationships with global powers. Iran should not be beholden to China or to Russia or to any state for that matter. As it once had, Iran should have a foreign policy that balances regional neighbors but also global powers and can develop mutually respectful and mutually beneficial relations with all of them. Of course, returning more naturally to alliances with the West that it once had. And finally, to bring about peace not only through strength, but through development, and helping to build the region into a more prosperous one, as outlined by a trip that my colleagues took last week to Israel to begin the process of the Cyrus Accords. Now, Behnam Taleblu, a friend of all of ours who was on the panel earlier, has called this the Iran come home policy. After decades of the Islamic Republic taking over the Middle East, taking over capitals in countries across the region, it's time for Iran, after the fall of this regime, to come home, to think of its people, to build the infrastructure that it needs for its future. And I would add a second to that, which is Iran come home and Iran be a good neighbor. Iran can be, and under the direction that we recommend in this policy paper, a source for regional peace and stability. So what are our assumptions? I won't go through all of these because there's so much to get to. We have a few assumptions based that our paper is based on. The first of which is that the international community is ready to welcome this change. As I think you saw today, that is the case. That friends in Europe and Israel and the United States will recognize this change. That transparency in Iran's nuclear program, not the fake transparency that Arakchi and Grossi signed today, but proper, actual, verified transparency will lead to the removing of sanctions and the removal of Iran's international isolation. Normalization and that, as Kerry highlighted earlier, Russia and China will not intervene to save the Islamic Republic, but that they will allow this change to happen. Of course, that doesn't come without risks. I won't go into each of them, but you can read them here, and of course you can read the entire paper. Some of them are opportunism by other countries, the potentially weak state that Iran will critical to ensure that Iran is not taken advantage of in that critical transition period. Most risky to me for the entire project, however, is expectations and the fact that the people of Iran have been living under such terror for so long, and they have such a clear history with which to compare it. And the difficult thing will be controlling expectations such that people do not hope or imagine that the day that this regime is gone, things go back to 1977. It's going to take time. This proposal is realistic. It's based on facts. It's not based on pie-in-the-sky ideas. So that is a risk. What will we do? What do we recommend to be done immediately? This is week one. The first of which starts by breaking taboos. Part of those taboos have already begun to be broken. Recognizing Israel after decades, normalizing relations with the United States once again, and working openly and clearly with the IAEA, in addition to sending envoys and messages of pacificity, of brotherhood to Iran's regional partners. And of course, requesting immediate suspension of the sanctions. And that goes without saying that the regime's support for proxies would all be gone because that regime would no longer exist. In the months to follow, there are many more things that have to be done to build confidence with regional partners, to build confidence with international institutions, with key global powers. We outlined several of them here. It's in much greater detail in the booklet. which I'll allow you to read there. But it culminates in not only fixing the mess that the Islamic Republic will have left Iran with, but building a plan for a sustainable, peace-centered foreign policy for the future of Iran. This, we think, is the beginnings of that, but the interim foreign minister will be responsible for putting together a proper foreign policy that can guide Iran for the years to come. Again, I won't go country by country, but throughout the paper, you'll see that our experts who have put this together have analyzed relations between Iran and regional countries and also global powers on a country-by-country basis, and have recommendations as to how to immediately build confidence, how to immediately cut tensions with each of those countries, even the countries with whom it will be very difficult to deal with. For example, Turkey or Azerbaijan, some of whom may want to foster territorial claims against Iran, or who may want to foster dissent or unrest within the country, steps that can be taken to immediately nip that in the bud and ensure that neighbors treat one another with respect. And that will be the first demand that this project outlines, is that Iran in the future, after the fall of this regime, will seek peaceful relations with all of its neighbors, but that peaceful relationship has to be based on mutual respect for one another's territorial integrity and national sovereignty. And so each of these countries have points to which we allude as to how to solve these issues going forward. Oh, we have a blank slide here. And it continues to go on in neighbors in the Persian Gulf, in neighbors in Central Asia, and of course for global powers as well, the United States, China, and others. What do we expect to happen? We expect, if these steps that we outline are followed, for sanctions to be relieved, for the international community to recognize the interim government after the fall of this regime. We expect regional relations to become normalized very quickly, for countries to welcome this change. The secret that we don't say in this report is that even the countries today that are signing normalization agreements with the Islamic Republic, for example, Saudi Arabia, we think and we know that they would welcome this change. They would welcome the Islamic Republic to be gone, but they're not in a political situation to be able to say that yet. And therefore, we expect that these changes to come about warmly welcomed by Iran's neighbors. And finally, most importantly, underlying all of this is replacing an ideological diplomacy and foreign policy with one based on pragmatism and national interest. But of course, we can't just say that those things are going to happen and never have questions not asked. So we outlined in the report specific metrics as to how the success of this foreign policy transition can be judged, the speed and the scope or width of these recognitions, how quickly sanctions are relieved on Iran, cooperation with international institutions, including the IAEA, and of course, the reduction of regional tensions. So I tried to give that to you all very briefly and short. I encourage you to read this paper in full, whether in English or in Persian, to give us comments and feedback on it, although at this point you only have about 24 hours left because tomorrow is the final day of the comment period. But for those in Washington, the message is quite simple, and for those in London, Paris, Riyadh, wherever they may be, that the regime that will follow the Islamic Republic, provided it goes the way that we are advocating, will be one that fosters peace, that fosters cooperation, that fosters mutual relationships based on mutual respect. And so the way for regional countries, for global powers to ensure their own security, that of their citizens, and a long-term peaceful relations both in the neighborhood and on the global scale is to support democratic, legitimate, organic change in Iran to secure the neighborhood and to secure global peace. Thank you very much.
دارن سخنگوها رو عوض میکنن. درود بر شما لیبرا. فکر میکنم که نمی کنم فرد جلسه فارسی باشه. یکی از بچه نوشته، جناب فازی یا بانو فازی، باورمندم که انگلیسی هر دوش.
Please join us in welcoming the foremost advocate for secular democracy in Iran and a symbol of hope for millions of Iranians at home and abroad, our keynote speaker, His Royal Highness, the Crown Prince of Iran, Reza Pahlavi.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Please. Can you hear me okay? Good. Not breaking with tradition and going over time, I plan to go a little bit over time with my time speech. So before I start my formal speech, let me say a few words and a couple of comments based on what we heard today. First and foremost, I'm so glad to see familiar faces in this room, some of whom I've known for nearly half a century. There's at least one person in this room whom I have known for more than half a century, who was at the time our athletic and sports teacher, world-renowned. I'd like you to stand up and be recognized, Dr. Iraj Ahrabi-Fahd. And of course, during the course of the past 4 decades, I've come to know so many other faces who are also here today. But I'd like to emphasize the importance of the new faces we see today. And boy, do we need more of you, especially the representatives of today's generation. You know, when I was in Munich, I kept thinking, how many more times do I have my cheeks and my shoulders wet with the tears of grieving mothers and people who were shot in the face during the Mahsa revolution? Enough of that. We need to put an end to that. And the Gen Z of Iran today represents our hope for the future. And by the way, I want to start calling them the Gen V, because they are the ones. Now, on the issue that was discussed about the events that happened today, you know, we spoke about Ronald Reagan. One thing I remember from his doctrine was trust but verify. On the other hand, you have a regime who basically believes in the principle of taqiyya, which means a way to disguise your true intentions by openly lying about your true intentions. And when it comes to IAEA verification, never mind verify. Can you trust them to begin with? And how much more time would be wasted as a result, depriving an opportunity for the Iranian people to liberate themselves, and yet more tears shed for more victims. That needs to be fully understood. And I specifically am addressing analysts, members of the media, lawmakers, and decision makers. You need to realize that there's been enough time for this regime to show its true intentions, and we know it's certainly not good, it's only evil. And hopefully, we who represent the alternative will prove to the world that rather than getting this regime more opportunities to blackmail governments by taking hostages to barter them for their own existence, we need to put an end to all of that. So this is an opportunity not to be missed. That's why we're here today. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, and dear compatriots, I am pleased to once again join Nufti at the Iran conference. Over the past 4 years, this conference has become more than just an annual event. It has become the leading forum to discuss and debate Iran, Iran policy, and our nation's future. 4 years ago, you set out on this path, and in the years since, you have altered the conversation in Washington to finally give our people a voice. You are forging unity within the Iranian diaspora. I am proud to stand along you, and I look forward to continuing our collaboration in the critical months and years ahead. Our mission is urgent, but it is not without direction. I have outlined a clear strategy, 5 points that together chart the path from tyranny to freedom. First, maximum pressure on the Islamic Republic. This regime thrives on impunity and on the silence of the world. We must ensure that the world never forgets the crimes of this regime, from executions and torture to corruption and theft on a national scale. Second, maximum support for the Iranian people. Our people must know that while they fight, they do not fight alone, that the world stands with them, that they can count on the diaspora to advocate for their rights. Third, maximum defections from the regime. Every Iranian who withdraws their support from this system brings us closer to freedom. Whether they are in government, the military, or the bureaucracy, we encourage them to choose the nation over the occupiers. Fourth, maximum mobilization and organization of activists inside and outside the country. Our struggle requires discipline, coordination, and solidarity. The Islamic Republic wants to divide and discourage us. We must do the opposite. We must unite, mobilize, and persevere. And fifth, a plan for prosperity after the fall of the regime, the Iran Prosperity Project. This project is not a slogan. It is a blueprint for rebuilding Iran after liberation, so that when the day comes, we are prepared. Last week, my delegation of experts traveled to Israel. They met with President Isaac Herzog, Minister of Science, Innovation and Technology, Gila Gamliel, and the top Israeli scientists to not only address Iran's water, electricity, and economic crises, but lay the groundwork for the Cyrus Accords between Israel and a free, democratic, and prosperous Iran. These 5 points reinforce one another. Pressure weakens the regime, support empowers the people, defection hastens the end, mobilization builds strength, and planning ensures that victory leads to a new day for our nation. To bring this vision to life, allow me to expand on 2 pillars that are essential to our success: maximum pressure and maximum support. On maximum support, I want to recognize the tremendous work Nufti has done in this area. The maximum support booklet provided practical tools for policymakers, journalists, and citizens across the free world to stand with the Iranian people. And a 15-point policy plan developed for Western lawmakers has given friends of Iran in Washington, Brussels, Ottawa, and beyond concrete steps that can take to to isolate the regime and empower our people. These are not just documents. They are instruments of action that together we have used to shape real policy change in the corridors of power. On maximum pressure, over the past year, I have traveled to capitals across the West, from London to Paris and beyond, making the case for stronger action against the Islamic Republic. These diplomatic efforts are yielding results. In the United Kingdom, we are closer than ever to formal proscription of the IRGC as a terrorist organization. In Australia, the IRGC has now been officially listed and the regime's ambassador expelled. These are important victories. Each sanction, each expulsion, each designation tightens the noose around the regime, raises its cost of survival, and signals to our people that the world is not just listening, but acting. On maximum defections, my team has taken unprecedented steps to offer an off-ramp to those officials and affiliates of the regime who wish to stand with the people. Tens of thousands of Iranians across the armed forces, bureaucracy, and state apparatus have joined the defection platform we launched this summer. They have accepted the call to defy the regime and join the nation. These brave, patriotic men and women are already taking actions that are bringing us closer to victory. On maximum mobilization, this summer in Munich, I hosted the Convention of National Cooperation to Save Iran, a non-precedented moment in our movement's history. More than 500 activists and opposition groups from across Iran's diverse cultural, religious, and political spectrum convened, connected in a bold declaration of unity and purpose. A clear signal that this struggle is no longer defined by the past, but the shared future we are building. This unity was symbolic, it was practical and strategic. It demonstrated that the democratic opposition is organized, inclusive, and capable of preparing for transition. It showed that Iranians from every walk of life are ready to work together to build a post-Islamic Republic future based on these core principles: commitment to Iran's territorial integrity, the individual rights and equality of citizens, the separation of religion and state, and the inalienable right of the Iranian people to choose their future form of democracy. Munich was only the beginning. I once again extend my hand and invite all those who agree to these principles to join us in this campaign. Last year, at this very conference, I announced the Iranian Prosperity Project, or IPP. It was a vision, a promise to the people of Iran that we would be ready the first day after the fall of this regime. We've made remarkable progress in a year. We convened the first Iranian Prosperity Project conference, bringing together experts and patriots from across the world to focus on Iran's future. At that gathering, we released the first 6 policy papers, concrete practical proposals on how to rebuild vital institutions, stabilize the economy, and begin the process of national recovery. Then we unveiled the emergency phase booklet, a vital document that outlines what must be done in the critical first months after the regime collapses. From ensuring basic services to stabilize the currency to restoring law and order, this emergency plan will help prevent chaos and ensure a smooth transition. And perhaps most importantly, we launched a public comments period. For the first time in modern Iranian history, a project of this scale and importance has been opened to every Iranian for review, input, and critique. More than 6,000 have participated so far. This level of transparency is unprecedented. It reflects our belief that the future of Iran belongs not to one person or one group, but to the Iranian nation as a whole. In the coming months, more work will be done. The plan will evolve through debates, feedback, and dialogue. And when the day of freedom arrives, we will already have in the hand the framework needed to restore order and launch a new era of prosperity. This is how we ensure that the sacrifices of today's brave Iranians are not wasted. This is how we honor those who have fallen in the struggle. And this is how we demonstrate to the world that Iran is not like the failed experiments of the past, but a strong, proud nation rooted in 2,500 years of greatness, ready to return to its rightful place among the nations. My friends, many people in Iran and around the world have been asking whether the regime has weathered the latest storm, whether despite the devastating blows it has suffered, it will be able to regroup and survive. My answer to this is no. We are past this point. The only question is when and how it will fall and what will come next. The regime is weak and divided. It is turning on itself and fragmenting. And thousands of its leaders and personnel in the security services are offering to defect. Its proxies, Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis, have their backs to the wall. Assad has fallen. It is more isolated internationally than at any point in recent history. The Iranian people are bravely challenging its rule. Across the country, growing bolder every day. The opposition is more united and determined. Munich showed this, and we have a clear plan and organization. But I want to be clear. While the regime is weak and vulnerable, it will only finally fall if the Iranian people rise up once again. They know the future of Iran is in their hands. My job, with many of you here today, is to make sure the conditions for success are stacked in their favor, and to ensure we have a clear plan for the transition to democracy and economic recovery. I feel optimistic we will succeed, but not complacent. We need to be disciplined and determined. I pledge to fight shoulder to shoulder with all of you until Iran is finally free. Thank you. May God bless the people of Iran, and may freedom soon bless our homeland. Thank you very much.
فکر کنم دیگه هم بسیار عالی اینجا تمومش کنیم، درسته؟ فکر می‌کنم که
Ladies and gentlemen, we appreciate your patience as we reform the stage. Thank you very much. Please remain in your seats.
روز خیلی طولانی بوده براشونا. یعنی یه دونه میزه گرد دیگه هم ماشاءالله دارم. میدونی من فکر میکنم اتفاقا محتوای این کنفرانس خیلی خوب میشد اگر فارسی زبانم بود.
باید دوباره برگردیم اینو درستش بکنیم.
آره من فکر کنم لیبرا باید نمیدونم دوستان اگر میتونین کمک کنین که خیلی عالی میشه. میدونی چی میخوام بگم لیبرا؟ مثلا 45 دقیقه
آره باید پارت هر سخنرانی رو برگردیم با ترجمه.
آره بعد مثلا بذاریمش اتاق رو 45 دقیقه یا مثلا اینطوری بذاریم که برای ایران هم اینطوری استفاده داشته. میدونی چی میگم؟ یعنی مثلا بچه‌ها میخوان بیان تیکه تیکه گوش بدن. مثلا الان شده یه اتاق I don't know نه اکچولی استوب که هر چقدر بود نمیدونم، ولی الان منظورم ملتفتی، یعنی مثلا سکشن باشه که برای کسایی که داخل ایران. من فکر میکنم این خیلی مهمه شنیدن این کنفرانس. این نظر شخصی من.
آره دیگه باید، چون که حالا شما انگلیسی گذاشتی همزمان نداره ترجمه، ولی میشه به هر حال روش کار کرد.
آره من داشتم یه چیزی مثل اون چیز فکر میکردم، یوریکا، مثل اون چیز شبکه یوریکا فکر کنم، یونیکا. و اون مثلا روش میخونه، میدونی داب میکنه، منتها والا فکر کنم همه روز داب کردن یعنی چجوری افراد این کار رو انجام میدن؟ اگه اینکه سابتایتل توی خود ویدیو باشه که بذارین، نبود ولی که فارسی بزنه، چون که باشه بعد آدم مثلا تونتون میخونه دیگه. ملتفتی مثلا یه 3-4 نفر والنتیر بشن میشه خوندش،
و
ولی
بعد این که سید بشه احتمالاً برمیگرده و چون این مستقیم هست نه کلوز کپشن داره نه ترجمه داره، هیچی نداره این، ولی وقتی سید میشه این فانکشناش برمیگرده. حواست هست؟
آره ملتفت شدم.
آره اینا فانکشناش برمیگرده، فقط باید بدونی این کجاست، دیوان، بعد برگردی به خصوص سخنرانی شاهزاده‌ام که خیلی مهم بود، میشه تحلیلش کرد. اون 5 نکته‌ای که بهش اشاره کرد خیلی مهم هستش که ماکسیموم ساپورت و مردم و حد اکثر فشار به دولت و مابیلیزیشن دیفکشن یکی دیگه هم داشت بود، یکی هم که هم پروژه به اصطلاح چی بود، پروژه نوفدی بود، یکیش هم mobilization, defection, maximum support and maximum
Kindly
pressure.
take your seats as our next panel is about to begin.
یه راوند تیبل دیگه است فکر کنم. ببخشید. یعنی روزشون پکه ها. الان ساعت 4 به توی ایست کوست. این فکر کنم راوند تیبل آخرشون.
Ladies and gentlemen, kindly take your seats as the program is about to begin.
لیبرا شما یه نفر دستشو بلند کرده، من نمیشناسم، شما میشناسی؟
نه ابزار نگاه کنم من چی میخواد بگه.
Ladies and gentlemen, kindly take your seats as the next panel is about to begin. Kindly take your seats.
من فکر کنم شما میخوای اینو پخش بکنیم، میخوای بحث کنیم اگه
چیه؟
حالا ویدیو تو بذار حالا فعلا.
Our next panel, Tehran's War on America and the West, will examine the Islamic Republic's use of terror, propaganda, and subversion and what steps are needed to stop it. Joining us for this panel are Victoria Coates, Vice President for National Security and Foreign Policy at the Heritage Foundation, Andrew Ghalivi, Nufdi Senior Policy Analyst, Marjan Kapoor, founder and director of Alliance for Rights of All Minorities, and Nishank Motwani, senior fellow at the Australian Strategic Policy Institute. The panel will be moderated by Elena Shirazi, political correspondent at the Daily Mail. Please join me in welcoming our speakers.
Hello, everyone. So good to see you all. It's definitely, I have to give a shout out to Kamran for putting us after the Crown Prince. Thank you for that. That's certainly going to be a tough act to beat. But our panel today is going to be, as you can see behind us, Tehran's war on America and the West. And the Iranian government, as we know, doesn't really operate like most governments. It does some of its best work in silence. It operates in the shadows through its proxies like Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis. So we're going to get into that today, as well as some of the impacts that this has on U.S. soil. So this is certainly a really good way to tie everything in to end this wonderful conference. But I wanted to start with you, Victoria. Nice to see you. Thank you so much for taking part in this panel. But speaking about those attacks on U.S. soil, so since 2011, there have been several attacks, including President Trump, former secretaries of state, journalists. And so my question to you is, how should the United States adjust its security and counterterrorism to protect some of these high-level officials? If we could start with you, since I know you worked in the administration, the National Security Council, so I know you have a lot of good expertise in the matter.
I have views. Is this working? Excellent. So thank you, Elena and Cameron and Your Royal Highness and all our friends at Nufdi for putting together this great conference. It's always a highlight for those of us in the policy community in Washington. And I admit I take this a little bit seriously because I'm on their list of folks that are under threat, along with a number of us who were on the first Trump term National Security Council staff during the Qasem Soleimani action, for which I'm not sorry. And so that's something that we've worked on very hard. The previous administration refused to listen to us about the threats and the concerns, even while we were in dialogue with the excellent career FBI folks who took care of that file and would not provide us with any assistance, even cyber protections, alarms at the house, that kind of thing, interface with local law enforcement. They just said it wasn't an issue and they wouldn't deal with it. That has fortunately changed, and the FBI is much more forward-leaning now on these files. They've taken some people off some cases that we considered less of a national security imperative than this domestic threat in the United States. And I know Nishank is going to talk about the Australia issue, but we have to realize that they are here and they are active, and we do not know what crossed our southern border over the course of the last 4 years. There are certain groups we're particularly concerned about. This has to be first and foremost amongst them. So this is a problem that came in, when we wrote our Iran report in May about the potential U.S. strike. Rob Greenway and I defined that domestic threat as probably what worried us the most about a potential action against Iran by Israel, which we supported, but we thought it was important to point out this was a possibility and a vulnerability. So I do think we need more domestic counterterrorism on this and realize that we do have a foreign threat here present in the United States.
Thank you so much, Victoria. And on the topic of harassment, Marjan, if you can take this one, Iranian agents and proxies have harassed reportedly U.S.-based activists and journalists, notable people. So what new federal and local measurements would you see be put into place that would help keep these communities safe?
Thank you for that question. And also, I want to thank Nufdi and congratulate the organization for putting together such an incredible day. Really, I am so proud of every panel and every presentation, every project that Nufdi has put together. And it's really an honor to be on your advisory board. And Your Highness, it's always inspiring to hear you speak
absolutely. I think if there is any hope inside people, inside Iran, among the people who are increasingly desperate and increasingly frustrated by the mounting pressures and frustrations, it's really because of you and the hope that you bring to the society every time you speak. I know that it's what gets me going. And I know that it is the case for so many people inside Iran as well. But to go back to your important question, and I'm sorry for digressing, I just could not withhold my enthusiasm. To go to your question about the threat of transnational action on behalf of the regime right now inside the United States, the threats that we have seen against the journalists and the activists is real. I want to frame this issue, however, and make a comment that Iran is able to do this because they are repressing the journalists and activists and leaders inside the country right now. So this is a practice that begins on a domestic level and then it continues to permeate abroad. It also happens because Iran has a broad philosophy about its expansion views and export of the revolution abroad. It does so by controlling the narrative, by controlling how journalists are presenting facts, and by also challenging the democratic nature of the United States and the Western world. By weakening those elements, they try to find a way to infiltrate and impose their narratives, impose their way of challenging the norms that we have come to cherish so for over 200 years in the United States. And that's a norm of democracy and that's a norm of civility. So right now as we speak, at least 200 journalists and activists in the diaspora have reported that they have experienced threats to their lives perpetrated by Islamic Republic and their agents around the world. 80 reporters or citizen journalists in the country have been arrested only since the 12-day war. So we know that they have amped up the repression of the civilians, but it's even more so. And there is a significant emphasis on journalists and activists because they want to control the narrative and infuse their own views. It's really not about the facts. It's about the narrative. It's about what they want us to believe. And when they do so, using a whole variety of techniques, it's not just, it's assassinations, it's kidnappings, it's the list of the individuals, and I see that Ghazal is with us, and what they have done to your father, and what they have done to Ruhollah Zam, what they have done to try to do with Masih Alinejad. So many activists and journalists. The list goes on. And for every name that we know and we recognize, I want to say here that there are people who are afraid of reporting what is happening because this is exactly how the Islamic Republic operates. They threaten you and they say, if you report this, we will punish your family in Iran, or we will take revenge on your loved ones, wherever they might be. So it is called coercion by proxy, and it's one of the other techniques they have, in addition to the cyber attacks and the threats that they present in other ways.
I just want to note, the threats mentioned so far against dissidents, of course, are our top concern. The other threats we typically talk about are missiles, whether nuclear or ballistic. I think something that's not talked about as often is Iran's influence operations. Their goal isn't just to get dissidents around the world. Their goal isn't just to terrorize and scare, but they have an effort underway to essentially destroy our way of life. Nufti did a report on the UK's influence operations. The regime's influence operations in the UK. This ranged from Islamic centers, cultural centers, education centers. They send groups of students to UK universities to learn about drones so that they can then bring that technology back to Iran to give to Russia to kill Ukrainians with. They have camps for young children in the UK, one of which was just closed, at least partially thanks to the Newfdie report. So we're now working on the same report for the US, and what we're starting to find is that there are many states within the US that individually are each their own London. They each have a whole web of influence networks from the regime. The Islamic Education Center of Maryland and Potomac, the guy who founded it was found essentially by the CIA in the 1980s to be a regime agent, and has continued to open other centers to spread this ideology. This is just in the DMV that we've started. Michigan, Texas, California, New York. It's a really big growing problem, one that is not, I don't think, properly taken seriously because of all of the other threats from the regime.
And thank you so much, Andrew and Marjorie. I think what you brought up too was super interesting with the media, because I remember obviously covering it and watching American media cover the Israel-Iran war, the 12-day war, and think, where are they finding these people that they're talking to? And just kind of the weaponization of American media is certainly a part of this discussion, because they're using national media to get across their message, and that is, by definition, propaganda. So that is something that obviously I've seen a lot of, and just raise alarms as obviously a journalist and an Iranian American. Where'd you find these people? They don't represent us. So it's very interesting. And, Victoria, I want to see if you could answer this one. I think a lot of people remember in this room, the IRGC was labeled as a terrorist group in 2019. So I wanted to ask you, what legal and diplomatic changes do you think would treat Iran as a terrorist entity rather than a normal state? And essentially, what would that mean in practice moving forward?
Well, one of my co-conspirators in that project, Len Kordakovsky, is here, of course. It was one of our finest hours, because the bulk of the U.S. government did not wish to designate the IRGC. It had been brought up before. The State Department objected for a whole host of reasons. The Defense Department had probably the strongest argument, which was it could expose the U.S. military to similar designations, and then give our troops vulnerability if they were traveling, something like that. But my feeling was throughout that the IRGC was so demonstrably a terrorist organization, and that it was not functioning in any way like a normal military. And so working with our colleagues in the Treasury Department, the State Department, and in the Defense Department, we built the case as to why their behavior was not just material support for terrorism, it was actually engaging in terrorist acts. And so, what we've seen here in the United States, when Avril Haines, the former DNI, came out in July of 2024 and said the Iranians have been here providing material support to the pro-Hamas protests on our campuses, that is the IRGC inserting itself into this kind of systemized anti-Semitism that they're using as a wedge to create divisions and disruptions in our society. And that is racial terrorism, for want of a better phrase. There are any number of other examples of their terrorist activities. And so our conclusion was it was necessary and right to designate them, and that we would do what we had to do to protect our own people in the event that these terrible things that were being predicted by DOD or DOW or whatever it is now, that they came true, we would be able to take care of our folks, and that all proved to be correct. And it's really heartening to see, Australia take this step, others, to say this is not a normal military. It should not be treated as such. It should not be elevated to that status. It is being used as an
مایکم باز بوده ببخشید.
International, almost paramilitary organization. So that's what we did, why we did it. Heaven knows the previous administration came in wanting to reverse the designation, but because of the hard work of so many people, they couldn't.
Yeah, interesting. So many countries, so many leaders still doing business with the government. And so what all of that means is definitely a big question moving forward as well. So thank you, Victoria. Nishinga, I wanted to ask you specifically, European and Australian authorities have acted against Iranian plots. Just one recent example of this was when Australia expelled the Islamic Republic's ambassador over anti-Semitic attacks, as we've been discussing. So my question to you is, how can democratic countries better coordinate on things like sanctions, intelligence sharing, and extradition to counter Iran's global and vast, wide-reaching networks?
Thank you very much. And again, I just want to echo that it's an honor to be here, and thank you to Nufti for putting up this wonderful conference, and it's delightful to be here. Australia, I think one of the key things to remember is that this is all very recent. So on the 26th of August, just a few weeks ago, Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese gave a major press conference. Standing aside him was the Director General of the Australian Strategic Intelligence Organisation, which is our domestic spy organisation. We also had the Foreign Minister, Penny Wong, and we had our Home Affairs Minister, Tony Burke. And at that particular press conference, what the Prime Minister said was that two anti-Semitic attacks that took place in Australia in October and December of last year were directly linked to the IRGC, which resulted in two things. One was the expulsion of the Iranian ambassador along with three senior Iranian diplomatic staffers. Second, Australia recalled its own ambassador from Tehran and significant number of staff and suspended operations in Tehran. And the other big move was that it said it would list the IRGC as a terrorist organization. The result of which is that it's unprecedented in Australia's history, which is to label an organ of a state as a foreign terrorist organization. If you look at the catalog of the states, of the entities that are terrorist organizations, I believe there's 31 of them. And so once this one is listed, it will add to that list. But the company now that the IRGC finds itself in would be Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Hezbollah, Hamas, and many other such entities, including recently added far-right entities such as Terrorgram, which is a play on Telegram. So what this does is that it really limits the extent to which countries are going to be able to engage with the IRGC. And in Australia's case, it criminalizes any association, linkage with the IRGC with a whole set of different criminal penalties. So to answer your question about how does this change and what can we do democratically, there has to be an order of priorities. One of the sources of funding for the Iranian regime is oil. And that is a significant that's a significant source of revenue which needs to be tackled. Second is that through the range of different Islamic centers and community organizations that it has, is that look at the propaganda material that's in them. Do a proper study to see what actually is being taught there, to see how those seeds of dissent are taking place and how they are going to be exploited, particularly around turbulent events when they do take place, whether it's campus protests, whether it's elections, which in the US it happens every 2 years in the midterms. Back home in Australia, we have federal elections every 3 years. And that is when you have information warfare that gets carried out. So there has to be greater coordination amongst, whether it's the Five Eyes, but also amongst the European countries who have not yet designated the IRGC as a terrorist organization, because it is, as Victoria said, it's a monstrous organization which has been carrying out and has carried out a range of different malign activities to really coerce people overseas and, of course, within the country.
Thank you so much. I don't know if you saw that the State Department wants to pass some laws to not let Iranian diplomats shop at Costco. I think that's going to serve the biggest blow that we've seen so far. Victoria, if I can also have you answer this one, talking about Iranian cyber units, targeting even things like U.S. water systems, probably one of the last things that we would think about, as well as other local infrastructures. What cyber rules, requirements, and funding, in your opinion, should be prioritized to protect some of these local services?
This is a really serious problem, and what they went after are these little regional companies or utilities rather that are not in this sort of federal level in terms of their security, and you don't think about the Iranians weaponizing water in regional U.S. markets. It's just it seems bizarre, but that's where they're headed because they know that's where the vulnerabilities are, and it extends from water to electric to telecommunication, whatever you'd care to mention in the utility sphere, because that can be fairly easily disrupted now through cyber means. And so I think there's a ton of attention to this in the new administration, to hardening those various grids, networks, making sure that we can prevent that kind of easy disruption, that we have duplicative levels of redundancy. So if one level goes down, you have another one there to provide that critical service. And the bad news is, as Americans, is it's not just Iran. It is also the North Koreans, China, and Russia, their closest friends, all of whom are interested in this, and they're all collaborating on it and pooling resources and knowledge. And so I think we are very fortunate that none of this has risen to the critical level yet, but I would be amazed if we get through much more time without a very concerted national effort on this, that we don't have a problem.
Thank you, Victoria. I want to go back to the oil smuggling that we were talking about, Nishank. Iran earns a lot of illicit revenue from that. So I'm wondering, in your opinion, what enforcement tools do you think would sort of break up Iran's web of oil smuggling, and what are the best enforcement ways that you see that moving forward? Would it be insurance, shipping, so on and so forth?
I think if you break down that question and look at it from different levels, you have the international, regional, and then the key bilateral relationships that Iran utilizes and really depends on as a way to continue that revenue flow occurring. So at the intersection of the international and regional level, recently there was the SCO summit that took place in China, which was followed by a very grand display of what I call deterrence pageantry. So there it's the linkages that Iran has in terms of its oil revenue generation capacity, they need to be unpicked. So going after and putting pressure on the countries that trade with Iran, especially when it comes to oil. Secondly, you take it down to the regional level and you enforce that more. In a way, you can go after commercial shipping, make insurance costs higher, make it harder for them to sell their oil. But also, I think another tool that can be used is to use reputational damage. If you're purchasing oil, whether it's from Russia, whether it's from Iran, there have to be reputational costs as well. And the political costs will follow the reputational costs, the economic costs, and at the regional level. Then at the core bilateral level, there are some countries that obviously provide Iran with the key sources of revenue. So either you work with them, you isolate them, but you call it out. And I think that needs to be done. And so far, it's been that's an area we haven't seen much action on. But there can be that concerted level at those different stratas to amplify the pressure on Iran.
And China is one of the biggest clients of Iran's oil, correct?
That's right. China is one of the principal beneficiaries of Iranian oil.
Just one little footnote there. There was a weird moment, or I think it was earlier this year, it might have been last year, when Malaysia suddenly became China's biggest supplier of oil. And those of us who watched the markets were, what? And the Iranians were just dumping the oil in Malaysia, and they were transferring it to another ship and sending it in as Malaysian oil. So that was an interesting trick.
Certainly something to keep an eye on. Marjan, if you will, I wanted to ask you this as well. I think you'd be great for this one. Tech platforms have blocked Iranian disinformation campaigns that primarily have been targeting students and politics. But what rules, and this is a fine line here to dance, do you think platforms should follow to expose and stop these operations, while in the same vein also being able to protect free speech?
So yes, there has been situations where tech platforms have actually warned that they were being penetrated by, again, more of these techniques of aggression perpetrated by the Islamic Republic and their agents to create problems, to interrupt the flow of information, to create an imbalance in the level of in the difference between truth and falsehood, and also really to increase the level of fake news and make that go viral, or divisive news that would create problems and discord among the American people. There was some notice of some reports of strong effort, but I would say low reward for the Islamic Republic at the level of college campus activism. They were trying something called letters from the leaders, and they tried to artificially make that go viral. They really put all of their bots and their human bots behind it in order to make this go viral, but it really did not go very far on the level of college campuses. Or letters for you, really trying to connect and take credit for the student movement by getting the Islamic Republic to be the force and add more fuel to the fire. But more dangerously in my mind, or equally dangerous in my mind, has been the effort to interfere with the election process by creating disinformation about candidates and to cast doubts about the process of our elections. There were questions about phishing attempts, attacks to the email accounts of high-profile, high-level candidates, and whether you could say that the candidate of choice of the Islamic Republic will get elected or not, or whether you can say that, without reasonable doubt, the account was penetrated and compromised in one way or another. I think there is a secondary damage that we will all suffer from if this kind of behavior and this kind of and I'm not even a tech expert, but this form of cyberbullying and cyber attacks continue. It erodes the unity of American society, and whether or not this candidate is won or that candidate has lost, people will lose faith in the election process as a whole, and they will also lose trust on even the candidate of their choice. And this is exactly what the Islamic Republic is trying to do, because they want to weaken democracy, as I said, from its core. I'm just going to say one more issue, and this goes back to what Victoria was talking about regarding the level of dismissiveness that has existed in Washington, before. I was speaking to someone who is actually very well versed in the threat of Islamic Republic. They're very knowledgeable about the issue. And I showed them pictures of Arba'in from 2021, I believe. How many of you know what I'm talking about? The pictures of the Arba'in outside of the White House. Right? So Arba'in, for those of you who may not know, is the 40th day that is commemorated since the death of Imam Hussein. And it's a very important Shia holiday, and it's a day of mourning. And there was a visible. I can't say that it is as big as all the other protests that happen outside of the White House. Nonetheless, for me, as someone who grew up in Iran during the regime, and I saw the wrath that is in these protests, I saw these flags being positioned, and I showed this to my friend, and I said, "What do you think of this?" And said, "Well, that's not a big deal." I said, "No, this is exactly Islamic Republic's promise to turn the White House into a Hosseiniye, a shrine for Imam Hussein." So this got me curious. I did a little bit of research to see which American journalists had covered that particular protest. And I did not see one single example. I even did an image search from that day to see which American news outlets would be covering it. And beside English language section of Iran International and other diaspora media, there was nothing. But if you were to look at the Iranian media in Persian language, especially the state-sponsored media, they were seeing this as a step closer to the realization of their dream, to turn the White House into a Hosseiniya. And I'm telling you, hundreds of articles bragging about how they are coming close to turning the White House into a Hosseiniya. And the fact that there is this level of disconnect, that their English language people are not even recognizing this dream, nonetheless, and needless to say, seeing it as a threat is really a threat in and of itself, and we should be really aware of it and open their minds.
This is kind of what I was getting at when, one of the goals of this panel is to counter this idea that's growing on both the left and the right, that that the regime in Iran poses zero threat to America, to Americans, to Europeans, etc. Again, it's easy to say, well, they won't nuke us, or they won't bomb us, or not now, right? Again, we've heard this from many commentators on both sides. It ignores the fact that, many of our panelists today have extra security with them here today because they have threats out against them, active threats out against them from the regime. I wonder if the president is being made aware that there are regular new threats from high-level regime officials and clerics inside of Iran against his life. Fatwas have been issued in the last 2 months. So it's as you said, the coverage of this isn't really there. So I don't know if people fully see all of these things. So maybe it's easy and they feel right saying, well, they pose zero threat to us. They're never going to bomb us because we would obviously eliminate them, and they know that.
It's a combination of arrogance that we are so great, we're so big, nobody can harm us. And also, I hate to say it, it's also a level of prejudice to think that these people are not capable of it. And I think it's a very dangerous combination.
I think even going beyond that, we have to understand that the threat is going to continue until the regime ends. We saw, Behram and Saeed here wrote a piece in the Wall Street Journal where they made the point, we saw with the fatwa with Salman Rushdie, it took 30-something years for that to take effect. This is an ongoing fight that is not going to end in the next couple of years until the regime is gone.
Just to add to that, I think what it also expresses is the way the regime manifests itself and carries out its action is that it's really clear it's very ideologically based. This is ideological fundamentalism at play where they've created an enemy image of their counterparts, and that enemy image is very much based on who the other person is, who their counterpart is, as opposed to what they do. And when that particular enemy image and the basis on which it's created becomes the filter through which they see the outside world, pretty much anyone is the enemy.
Thank you. Just offering my two cents on this unsolicited, with the Wire reporters covering this and that. It's just working in a traditional newsroom, working in several. I can, tell all of you so many pitches that I've done and tried to do that haven't exactly worked because there was no big, missile or any kind of weaponry used, or there wasn't a full-blown war like the Iran-Israel war. There were kind of the signs, the writing was on the wall, but a lot of the media didn't really start reporting on that until everything was sort of over and done with. And so to answer your question, that's kind of the inside look there. And of course, as an Iranian American, I'm always trying to pitch those stories, just to kind of follow up on it, since we do have a good look at what's going on. But going back to the the hate speech, anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is, as we have seen, full front in the Iran-Israel war, really central to the Iranian government's ideology, their propaganda. Israel is one of the United States' biggest allies in the Middle East, and so many things are shifting in our landscape. Victoria, if I could ask you, in your best knowledge, how do you think the United States should address this threat through Homeland Security or things like community protection programs?
This has been central to a lot of work I've been doing over the course of the last year. I wrote a book on Israel after October 7th and what had kind of emerged. And one of the things that I think was really startling to most Americans was the organized virulence of the anti-Semitism that seemed to be waiting for a sign. This did not try to hide itself. It was, and as I said, organized, ready, and sprang into action, and that we had allowed that situation to so metastasize, specifically but not exclusively on campuses, is really chilling. And we have to realize this is not just a spontaneous response to the government of Israel by some romantic young Americans. It isn't. It is organized. It is being implemented as a program. And the worldview here, and one unpleasant thing to do is go back and look at different manifestations of anti-Semitism, and you could argue that something like the Spanish Inquisition was primarily a religious movement. The Third Reich was racist. This is civilizational, and so they don't care if they're finding people in Australia or Israel or the United States. It's that those need to be disrupted, even if you're a state like Australia, which is ostensibly quite pro-Palestinian. That doesn't matter. It matters is you're a Western-leaning democracy, and so you need to be disrupted. And in that worldview, Israel's the little Satan, and the United States is the great Satan. But we're both Satan. And if you think you're on a crusade to defeat Satan, if you get the little one, you're not going to end there. You're going to go on and say, well, we're going to go for the big one. And so we as Americans have to realize, that this is not where the heart of the Iranian people are, but this is where the heart of the regime is, if they have one. And that's what they're trying to achieve. And so, we as Americans have to wake up to it. It's why we have initiated the National Anti-Semitism Task Force. I'm proud to have Eli Kohianim, one of my co-chairs of that, here today, doing the important work of Project Esther, which earned me something I never thought I would have, which is a profile in the New York Times. Because the New York Times thought it was really shocking that a bunch of people at the Heritage Foundation think it's a bad idea to hate Jews. But this is, they were amazed. But this is why it's so important. And so, yes, there's work we can do with local governments. There are legal challenges, what the administration is doing with our institutions of higher learning. These are all the actions that need to be taken to disrupt this.
Thank you so much, Victoria. I think a lot of times with the Iranian regime, when there's smoke, there's fire, but you don't really see it till it's full blown. And I've had so many officials from the State Department say, Iran's trying to hack into this, Iran's trying to hack into that, this is happening, and the other. We've seen Iran exploit U.S. election cycles to launch operations and kind of create this distraction method. So my question, I'm looking at you, this one's for you. I want to ask you, what systems do you think that democracy should create to, in essence, stay alert and ready during these predictable, is safe to say, distraction periods?
I think a whole range of measures, and some of them have already been covered. I think one which requires steady implementation is spotlighting it. Spotlighting the areas around which there needs to be better transparency around, which would allow for greater one, public awareness, but secondly, also community intervention. Third, and I'm talking about at the local level, tactical level right now, because so much of the entry points are in fact tactical. They serve as entry points where they can really, as in the IRGC, can really exploit cleavages. So it is paramount to have that degree of community outreach at the local level, and I'm talking about specifically in Australia's case, where they have been, where in both the anti-Semitic cases last year, which were linked back to the IRGC, is to see what are the linkages also between them and organized crime. Now, this is not to say organized crime is behind it, but they're certainly being used, and they're happy to be paid to extend the arm of the IRGC. So, number one, at the local level. Secondly, in terms, especially amongst the Five Eyes, but also extending to the EU, is greater policing cooperation. And I think that it also should extend to the fact that Australia has taken the unprecedented step of designating the IRGC as a foreign terrorist organization. Other countries that have yet to do so, who are dealing with the consequences of not being able to, should also consider and ratchet up the pressure against it as a way to really close the areas through which it exploits these the freedoms that we all care about and enjoy.
Thank you so much. Yes, please.
Yes, I just wanted to also add, there's significant importance in coordination on an international level, but also domestically, I think that our government can do better between the FBI and CIA and DOJ and Treasury. All of these elements can also do a better job of coordinating and sharing threats, regardless of partisan politics. I think these are really American values that are in danger right now, and it's really important that we take them seriously. Also, in terms of one of your questions about cyber information, digital information, and content moderation. Yes, there is always fear that these content moderators are going to exploit by restricting speech. But I think that the onus is on the content moderators to show transparency about their methods and about the algorithms also, so that they are not influenced by these outside malign influences. Lastly, I just want to let you know that I'm aware of the fact that I use the term cyberbullying to talk about cyber attacks, but I see the regime as a big bully. Therefore, I think whatever they're doing in the cyberspace is also cyber bullying. So just wanted to put that out.
Thank you so much, Marjan and Nishank. I think bottom line, it's obvious that the Iranian government uses a mixed bag of tricks, if you'll call it that, for coercion, whether it be cyber attacks or propaganda or lobbying or even using, the media to get their message across. So whoever wants to take this one, I wanted to ask you, essentially, what is needed, would you say, to sort of counter the whole system of the Iranian government and not just go after it in bits and pieces, to really get to the root of it?
Just very quickly say, I think we do need a special envoy for Iran to be the head of this program. That's not just limited to negotiations over the nuclear program, which are hopefully a moot point, but to coordinate these efforts. The Costco thing is funny, but it's also symbolic. We all saw all those pictures of Rouhani and Zarif and the big pallets of stuff they were buying. This was something I worked on with Senator Cruz when we used the terrorism designation as a means to deny a visa. But all of this needs to be coordinated, that this is an attack on our country. And so it does have to do with the civil infrastructure and that issue. It has to do with the information spaces, as Andrew said, but that we all need to bring these things together and realize that we face a major threat. And this is a major threat we just struck. We struck them decisively. They couldn't do anything about it. They know we can do it again. And yes, they had their theater in Qatar. That wasn't really a response. So we have to be on the lookout that this is now a game of it.
Yeah, actually, my report today was a little bit about that. The Ritz-Carlton in Doha hosting Hamas and Iranian government officials American hotel. So that kind of underscores the kind of points that we've been making about, does the government really take them seriously? Do they really see the IRGC as the threat that they are? And it just underscores, I guess, bigger questions about that, whole thing. So any other final thoughts? If not,
I'm just going to add one thing because I thought somebody else was going to say it. And since it wasn't said, I'm going to say it. Better than banning Costco, for banning these agents from going into Costco and buying microwaves or whatever they were buying, I think it's better that we deny them visas so that they don't come to the U.S. or the General Assembly in the first place. Number two, I want to build on what Senator Cotton brought about last week, regarding the influence of Iranian regime inside the White House and inside the government. And the fact that we still don't know what is going on with Robert Malley's credentials, there's no transparency about it. Even right now, we need to know what is happening and why there are still certain vestiges of the last administration and the Iranian regime still inside the government. We need that to end. And better yet, I think there needs to be a much more comprehensive background checks for anyone, not only getting a job inside the government, but also those highly coveted positions in university departments, whether it is professorships or chairmanships. That we need more diversity of opinion. Forget the fact that we have Mousavian and Mahalati still, hopefully not for long, that they were there for such a long period of time. It's really incomprehensible to me, and we need to have better systems to control for these issues.
And I know we're going over it. I just wanted to point out that Molly's at Yale, and he just invited Zarif up to lecture.
Doesn't make sense.
No, but he actually went I don't know how he did the jump from Princeton to Yale, but Zarif is going to go up and imagine if you were paying that tuition and your kid came home and said, oh, this person came.
Thank you so much to everyone who's here today. Thank you to lovely panelists. When I do this, thank you to Nufti for inviting me back. And thank you to everyone again for being here. Time, but I hope that everyone else enjoyed our discussion today. So thank you everyone for being here. Thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, kindly remain in your seats as we have one more presentation.
Oh my God.
Ladies and gentlemen, kindly remain in your seats as you have one more presentation.
Huh?
احتمالاً تا 15 دقیقه دیگه هست، یکم صبر داشته باش.
باش.
Ladies and gentlemen, kindly remain in your seats as we still have one more presentation to go. Ladies and gentlemen, kindly remain in your seats as we have one more presentation to go. Thank you.
Dear friends at the
The final IPP presentation of the day, aka Iran Prosperity Project, will be on military and security affairs. Join us in welcoming IPP contributor, former U.S. government professional, and intelligence expert, Shabnam Panahi.
Thank you. Okay. Your Royal Highness, distinguished colleagues, and honored guests, it's a privilege to address you today on behalf of Iran Prosperity Project. The collapse of the current regime in Iran will not by itself bring stability. Without preparation, the day after the regime fall could very well bring chaos and insecurity. This is why our team in IPP has put together a roadmap for reforming Iran's military and security. This plan is designed to preserve stability, protect the people, and build democratic accountability from day one. So let's begin by looking at the current situation, the challenges we will face once the regime falls, and the actions that are required to secure a democratic future. So currently, Iran's military and security institutions are deeply political and they're ideological by the IRGC, Quds Force, and Basij. They, instead of serving the nation and the people, they've been used for repression, corruption, and foreign adventurism. For example, the IRGC has not only repressed the dissident, but they have also drained Iran's national resources on proxy wars abroad. Also, the public trust in these institutions are very low. Ordinary Iranians see them as serving an ideology and corruption rather than the people and the nation. But to understand where we are going, we have to be honest about the challenges we will be facing after the regime falls. After the fall of the regime, we will have several challenges coming at us, probably all of them at the same time. Loyalists could try sabotage using armed resistance of stockpiles of hidden weapons that they may have. Militias and separatists in in border regions like Khuzestan, Baluchistan, or Kurdistan could seize this opportunity to grab power. Also, foreign players like China, Russia, and regional proxies will see this as an opening to protect their own interests. Meanwhile, regular soldiers already dealing with economic hardship and low pay, low morale, may see an uncertain future for themselves. So we can see without a plan, this could actually spiral out of control really quickly. That's why our first priority after the fall of the regime has to be very clear and realistic. Our main goal and priorities after the fall of the regime is very simple, keeping the country stable and safe. This would mean preventing any sort of coups, insurgencies, uprisings, and also keeping borders secure, protecting the key infrastructure like the oil and power plants, and of course the airports. So just as important is separating the regime criminals from the professionals. This plan is not about revenge, it's about reform. Most people in uniform can and should be able to reintegrate back into the new institutions. Of course, those who are guilty of crimes will face justice. This distinction is vital because we have to avoid the mistakes of the past, like of Iran in 1979, or even in Iraq in 2023, when thousands of professionals suddenly being excluded became the backbone of insurgencies and chaos. And the final goal is clear: to be able to keep the institutions in place, but reform them and build a professional and accountable democratic institutions. Of course, every plan makes certain assumptions, and we have to be upfront about the risks we will be facing if those assumptions don't hold true. We are assuming that most of the personnel, uniformed personnel, can be brought back into service. We are also counting on diaspora professionals and defectors to help us, and international partners to help us fill in key gaps. But there are risks, as I mentioned. The loyalists, may try to sabotage and undermine this process by forming new militias. Foreign actors might step in to destabilize things, and also people may not immediately trust these institutions again. And finally, we may not actually have enough personnel and leadership that are both competent and fully committed to democratic ways. And obviously, without credible leadership, even the best plans risk failure. History has shown the transitions fail when we take the assumptions as guarantees. That's why we have to prepare and not just hope that things are going to go well. To deal with these challenges, we cannot wait until the regime falls to start planning. The preparation has to start before the collapse. This is what we call phase 0 in our IPP plan. Before the collapse, we have to have a structure, a system in place to both carefully vet the people that are coming forward. This requires physical channels as well as encrypted digital platforms to protect individuals and also build credibility. This effort is already underway by the Office of the Crown Prince, which they have facilitated over tens of thousands of individuals who have come forward declaring that they want to break away from the regime and align with the opposition. And of course, that number is growing. We also need to set up secure communication and command centers so the leadership doesn't break down in time of crisis. In many transitions, for instance, in Kabul in 2021 and in Libya, the communication failure was first spark of chaos. So we also need to, during the phase 0 time, we need to use technology, AI, and diaspora intelligence experts to map regime assets so we know exactly where the threats are and who controls them so we can get ahead of them. We will need to run simulations for how to deal, to be able to handle sabotage and unrest and foreign-backed insurgencies. These drills will essentially ensure that we are ready for surprises. These steps will mean that when the regime falls, we are ready to act instead of reacting. But preparation is only the beginning. What matters is how we are going to be rebuilding from there on. In our IPP plan for reforming Iran's military and security, we have a 24-month lookout, essentially, that can be broken down to 3 different phases: the stabilization phase, reconstruction, and consolidation. The stabilization phase is about making sure that these institutions function. Soldiers are getting paid, borders are secured, and the country is calm. The second phase, reconstruction phase, is about rebuilding our military and intelligence service institutes based on democratic principles. Part of that is going to be training and retraining the personnel based on accountability and professional excellence. The third phase, the consolidation phase, will be about embedding those reforms and under real civilian control, so the old habits don't come back easily. This would mean we would have to have oversight committees, parliamentary reviews, and annual public reporting in order to build that trust from people towards these institutions. And the end result is clear, to be able to have a professional, unified, and accountable armed forces that are loyal to the nation and they are not serving any ideology. Of course, the first tests are going to come much sooner than the 24-month mark. The initial 180 days is going to be critical, which is what we call the emergency phase in the booklet that IPP put forward. During that first 180 days, the focus is going to be obviously on survival and stabilization, securing key sites, seizing weapons, imposing curfews when and where is necessary in order to keep order. And also, it will be essential during that time for our armed forces and security and intelligence institutions to show to people visibly that they are there to protect them and not to target them, in order to be, again, to build that trust with the public. During that first 180 days, we will start vetting personnel, disarming loyalists, rooting out any regime spies that may be already embedded in our institutions. And during that time, during the vetting time, transparency is going to be critical because we want to show to people that there is a fair and evidence-based process in place. We will also start standing up new institutions like the National Intelligence Service and a reformed National Police Force, which will be under strict civilian control and oversight. And finally, we have to stress test these new reformed institutions to make sure that they can stand things like cyber attack, border incursions, and civil unrest. During this first that we are transparent with the Iranian people through public dashboards, and also start working with our international partners to build that legitimacy. The way we will prove that we are succeeding, is by setting clear goals, clear and measurable goals. Our targets and goals for the first 180 days in this plan is that within that first 180 days, we want to make sure that we dissolve IRGC and Basij, and Artesh, Iran's military, is reformed and restructured. Borders and infrastructures are safe and secure, and the new National Intelligence and Police Force are operational. This will send a clear message to the Iranian people that the change is real. By the end of that 24-month mark, our goal is that we'll have a single unified military under civilian control, and a clean defense budget, and also Iran working with its regional and international partners in peacekeeping. These are not just some abstract promises. They are concrete milestones to show that Iran is not only free, but also safe and a regional force for stability. And at the end, our closing message in this plan is clear. Iran's transition has to be guided by stability, professionalism, and unity. By reforming our institutions rather than destroying our military and security institutions, we can safeguard Iran's territorial integrity, restore public trust, and prevent any mistakes of the past from repeating themselves. This isn't just a security blueprint. It is a commitment to the Iranian people that once the regime falls, once the day that they have their freedom, they will not be facing chaos, but the foundation of a democratic and accountable future. with leadership that unites us and institutions that protect us, Iran's future can finally be both free and secure. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to the stage Nufti Vice President Kamran Khansarinian.
Okay, I think it's it.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much, and thank you for staying all day with us throughout so many speeches, presentations, and panels. I hope that you learned something. Certainly I did. It's a great honor every year for Nufti to convene this gathering. Most importantly for me, because I enjoy being surrounded by people far smarter, far more talented, and far more capable than me. So we had a sincerely excellent lineup of people today, and I want to thank each and every one of them. And a few days ago, not many of you, probably the one or two people who were tuning in, probably saw Maryam Rajavi's latest rally somewhere in Europe. Unlike Mrs. Rajavi and their group, Nufti is proud that not a single speaker in any of our events has ever received an honorarium, a speaking fee, nothing. They all come here because they want to speak the truth. Because they want to speak the truth. They want to speak the truth to the people of Iran, the truth about the people of Iran, to Washington's leading policymakers, to the embassy staff who are here today, to the think tank leaders, to the journalists, and to so many more. So this conference would not be possible without the amazing speakers you saw today. So join me once more, please, in thanking all of today's speakers. And of course, my incredible colleagues on the Nufti team who have been working tirelessly over the past several days, running around, worried, sweating, a little bit scared throughout the day, but they put on, once again, a fantastic program. And without them, this wouldn't be possible. I'd also like to thank those members every year. Organizing this conference is a real honor for us. The effort that Dr. Ganji and our entire team put in is because we, as Mark on our panel said, believed that it was finally time for a conference to be held in Washington about Iran policy that was not just reproducing the propaganda and lies of the Islamic Republic, but rather speaking the truth about Iran, about what the people of Iran want, about what the Iranian American community and our diaspora want. And at the end of the first day of our fourth annual conference, I think with support of all of you who attended, with our donors, we've been able to achieve that. And we're immensely thankful that for the second year, the Crown Prince has chosen the Nufti Conference to deliver such empowering, important, poignant, and timely remarks. So thank you, sir, for once again being with us. So that said, thanks to all of you for being here. Thanks to the many thousands of you who have watched live, and we'll see some of you tomorrow. Thank you.
خسته نباشین. من این لینکش رو میذارم توی چت، بچه بریم لطفا لایکش کنین. این از این. بله اوا میگه صدا نیست. الان صدا نیست. الان من دیگه تموم شد دیگه. خب خسته نباشید. یا خدا. خب خسته نباشید. میخوای شما صحبت کن لیبرا؟
م، خب یک جالبی این کنفرانس ها اینه که به هر حال حالا تا اندازه صدا میاد بیرون که میفهمن چه خبر هستش و یک نهادی است که به هر حال داره دفاع میکنه از رهبریت شاهزاده. خودش هم که اینجا هستش ما دیگه به هر حال تراست میکنیم و چیزی که ایشون نهادی که ایشون ساپورت میکنه حتما اینو بررسی کرده میدونه چیه و راجب ایران میگه دیگه، راجب این خطرات جمهوری اسلامی اینا رو شناسایی میکنه. اینا خیلی مهمن که این صداها از داخل و خارج به هر حال به خصوص در آمریکا که کاوریج زیاده برسه به گوش هم. حالا نمیدونم میخوای، چون خیلی سخنران بود، البته من از وسطاش رسیدم چون من صبح نبودم اینها، ولی خب از همین آخرش که من بخوام یه مقداری بگم، واقعا مثلا این مسئله امنیت و سکیوریتی اند میلیتاریش خیلی مهم هستش. نکاتی که بهش اشاره میکنه اینجور نیست که یک نظامی بیفته و بعد همینجوری مثلا مثل اینکه انتخابات شده شما بری قدرت رو بگیری. نه، همیشه خطر اون لویالیستا، اونهایی که به رژیم قبلی به اصطلاح پایبند هستند، در پرایوریتی و در ارجحیت هستند که به هر حال باید حواسا بهش داده بشه. این برای ما خیلی اینها پتانسیل هستن. پتانسیل که هستن یعنی اینا اتفاق افتادن وقتی که حکومت مرکزی ضعیف شده، به خصوص این تجزیه طلب هایی که بهشون اشاره کرد. ممکنه ما اینا رو ساده بهشون فکر بکنیم ولی اینها ریل هستن. یعنی وقتی که سراغ شما میان تازه میگی واو ما چرا به اینها فکر نکردیم، ولی اینها واقعی هستن و این که شناسایی کنن، حالا اون چیزی که اشاره میکرد به شناسایی کنن این اموالی که رژیم داره، اینها خیلی مهم هستن. به خصوص نظامی که هیچ نظام اقتصادی سر و ته نداره، نه بانکش مشخص هستش، یک نظام به اصطلاح هرچی دلش خواسته کرده، رهبر دلش خواسته یک نهاد مالی برای خودش درست کرده، 20% نمیدونم برای خودش گرفته، اموال درست کرده، نهادهای درست کرده. خیلی نهادها پیش دیدن که بتونه ازش دفاع بکنه، چه نظامی چه سیاسی چه اقتصادی، نهادهای فرهنگی. همین حوزه هایی که در داخل و خارج درست کرده اینها خیلی مهم هستن که به هر حال شناسایی بشن و مورد بررسی قرار بگیرن. و این نکته هم که واقعا خیلی مهم هستش که همینجوری اونهایی که متخصص هستن یا کاری انجام ندن مثل 79 نشه برن بریزن دانشگاه، هرچی متخصص هست بریزن بیرون، مملکت و دانشگاه رو 3 سال تعطیل بکنن، نه متخصصی بیرون بیاد، نه دکتری بیرون بیاد، نه مهندسی بیرون بیاد، هیچ. مملکت تعطیله. بعد 40 سال که شما 3 سال این رو تعطیلش بکنی، 3 سال تعطیل کردن خیلی مهم هستش. شما هیچی پارادیوس نمی کنی. هیچ در این دنیایی که دانش با سرعت میره، شما مهمترین نهادهای آموزشی تو میگیری میبندی، برای خودت میبری اینها رو پول میخری، میری اسلحه میریزی توی بیابانهای، توی جنگ و اینها، جنگ و ادامه میدی 7-8 سال. تنشن مرزها خیلی مهم هستش، به خاطر اینکه هر کی ادعایی ممکنه بکنه میگه خب یعنی هستن اینها، چه شرق چه غرب چه شمال چه جنوب، ما همیشه این پتانسیالش هستش که اینها ادعایی بکنن که بخوان به هر حال به مرزهای ما تجاوز کنن. این فاز سکیوریتی، امنیت که وسیله مسئله نظامیات، واقعا اون مرحله مهمی هستش که بلافاصله بعد از سقوط نظام باید روش فکر کرد. حالا من خلاصه از اون چه که این خانم پناهی گفتش به هر حال گفتم، ولی اگه بخوایم برگردیم اینا رو یک به یک با ترجمه نگاه کنیم، خب اون یک مسئله دیگه هستش. مسئله قبلیش هم که حالا اون پنله بود که بعداً به هر حال جالبی این کنفرانس اینه که شما استرالیا، از آمریکا، از انگلند افرادی هستن که به خصوص نماینده‌ای که
از
از
ونزوئلا.
بله
آره اونجام چیز اون گروه مخالفش اینجا داشت حرف میزد و با ایران سالیدارتی چیز کرد، اعلام کرد. آره.
همون
یعنی با
اندرو میچل که نماینده
خانومه
پارلمان بود، گفت آره، گفت ما سعی میکنیم تمام امپی هامون پشت شما باشن. این رژیم سرکوبگری است. مردم ایران برای آزادی، دموکراسی و حقوق بشر می جنگن و ما پشت سر شما هستیم. مثلا اینکه این صدا از تمام شما وقتی که از یک پارلمان ساپورت، یعنی حمایت یک پارلمان رو داری، انگار که حمایت یک کشوری رو داری، چون اینها هر کدوم نماینده یک ریژن هستن که اینو فرستادن و این از جانب اونها، این نماینده در مجلس از جانب اونها صحبت میکنه و این بحث پارلمان ها خیلی خیلی مهم هستش که ما ببینیم یک اینجور صدا هستن و اینها کمک میکنه به اصطلاح اون نیروهایی که در داخل هستن، اینها رو میشنون، خیلی امیدواری به اینها میدن، میگن ما تنها نیستیم. کسانی هستن که میخوان دل سرد بکنن، بگن آقا ما چندین بار بلند شدیم، اعتراض کردیم، سرکوب شده، ولی نه، میفهمن که هنوز این آتش زیر خاکستر برپاست که هر لحظه این نظام رو به فرو بریزه. اصلا نظام کاملا خود اینها میدونن، فقط ساعت تیک تیک میکنه که به چه شکل فرو بریزه. یعنی مملکتی که سیاست خارجیش معلوم نیست، از عمان میپره به ایتالیا، از ایتالیا میره به امارات، از امارات میپره به نروژ، از سوئد میپره به مصر. معلومه که هیچ برنامه نداره. ما چی رو میخوایم تحلیل بکنیم، بشین مزخرفات ظریف رو گوش بکنیم؟ شما اگه میخواستی مسئله رو حل بکنی، همون توی عمان حلش میکردی دیگه. حالا میخوایم ببریم ایتالیا، میخوایم ببریم امارات، نه تو نامه رو نده، اون یکی به من بده. بپریم قطر. میدونی معلومه که نظام سردرگمه.
آره اصلا داره وقت میخره فقط گیج کنه همه رو به نظر.
اصلا خودش هم نمیفهمه، چون هر جا میره ایتالیا کمک بگیره، میگه شاید اینها باشن، میگه آقا من که اصلا اون ولم نه بابا، تو چه نظام سرکوبگری. میاد به اروپا بره، اروپا که دیگه این نظامو قبول نداره دیگه، میاد میره با مصر، میگه یه کاری به اینها بکنم. اصلا کاملا واقعا آشفته هست از سیاست داخلی و خارجیش. داخلم که میدونی دیگه، اصلا خود اون فرزند این میلیتاری صفوی که میگه آقا ما یه فکری به حال این بدبختی این مملکت بکنیم، اینها این خامنه‌ای رو خواهند کشت. مرده است آقا، نمیخوان باور بکنن. خود اینها میدونن. چرا این حرفو در پابلیک میاد میزنه؟ به خاطر اینکه میدونه دیگه کسی به این آقا دسترسی نداره. شما 95 میلیون کشور رو گرفتی و رفتی اون زیر، چجور میخوای اینو هدایت کنی؟ شما اگه توی خونه هم باشی که به اصطلاح 5 نفر رو رهبری کنی، باید هر صبح و شام بالا سر اینها باشی، اینا رو سرپرستی بکنی، ببینیم کجا هست، کی میره کجا، چقدر هزینه میشه. رفتی برای خودت اونجا، هر از چندگاهی میای یک دست چپ تو میگیری، راست میگیری، یک کاغذ میگیری دستت و شروع میکنی خوندن. خب بعد اینا رو اینا علامت هستن. ما اگه این علامت ها رو تشخیص ندیم، به هر حال با مشکل مواجه میشیم. حالا اگه صحبتی داری بگو.
علامت چی؟ که یعنی
بله.
دیگه علامت این که دیگه تمومه، یعنی باید دیگه جمعشون کرد. درسته منظورت اینه؟ درسته؟
آره اصلا شما میگم که شما علامت ها رو لازم نیست که ببینی، همینا رو که نگاه میکنی، بین این
right.
خطوط رو
آره
میخونی،
آره.
افراد رو که میبینی، اعمال اینا رو که میبینی، بهت نشون میده.
مهم. مهم. آره موافقم. قسمت اول تو از کی اومدی؟ چند ساعت بود اومده بودی؟ من
من
بیشترش رو
تقریبا
چک میکنم.
از اونجایی که همین نماینده چیز اومده بودین پارلمان صحبت میکرد، کمی از اولش فکر کنم دقیقا اه، آره همون جا هم اومده بودم.
ونزوئلا؟
نه
نه
ونزوئلا رو من نبودم.
نه. آره آره اولش خیلی اتفاقا امروز صبح برنامهش خیلی کامپریهنسیو بود، خیلی قشنگ خوب اطلاعات زیادی و خیلی پرکتیکال صحبت میکرد. یعنی مثلا میدونی همه چی رو گذاشته بودن روی هم که یک ذره مثلا نمیخوام حالا زیاد چیز کنم، ولی برای اینکه بالاخره اینم کنفرانس. ببین دوست دارم که اون سنس اف ارجنسیه، میدونی اونو من دوست دارم که اونو کانسیستنت ببینم، یعنی یک پارچه ببینم. متفقی منظورم؟ این واسه من مشکل زا میکنه که مثلا من یه جایی میبینم که یه سنس اف
صدات قطعه الهام، صدات قطعه. صدات قطعه، ولی من جایی که تقریبا همین اندرو میشل صحبت کرد وارد شدم دیگه. حالا اگه صبح چی گفته من نشنیدم یا باید برگردم دوباره لینک رو گوش بکنم، ولی نمیدونم برنامه چی هست. حالا
جواب میدم. اون
صدات
حس
قطع بود، صدات کامپلن 2 دقیقه از قطعه. ما صداتو نداریم.
خب من برگشتم، ببخشید. نه دیگه چیش هم گفتم به شما، صدا میاد الان؟
الان داشتی
آها.
راجب صبح میگفتی
آره
سخنرانی
ببین،
صبح.
آره مثلا ببین وقتی که پیغام میاد من دارم گوش میدم مثلا. خب ما الان در انقلابمون اول صفحه رو بگم، چون که ما مبارزه غیر مسلحانه انجام میدیم، پس رهبری کاریزماتیک دیگه اینجا. و رهبر کاریزماتیک یه جوری که پیغام باید، پیام باید خیلی کانسیستنت باشه، یه دست باشه که بتونه تو تمام لایه ها بره. چون ما دیگه اون رهبرای میدانی مثل اون خیلی هاشون که مثلا زمانی که مسلحانه است شما رهبرای میدانیتون هستن و فلان و بهمان، اینجا وقتی کاریزماتیکه یه پیام که میاد شفاف، هم توی همه لایه ها میره، هم گروه کوچیک کوچیک کوچیک. موضوع اینجاست که من خب مثلا من پیامی رو که میبینم کانسیستنت باشه یه دست باشه اینه که ما زمان برام مهمه، میدونی یه سنس اف ارجنسی به وجود اومد، یه فرصت طلاییه، ملتفتی. و من این رو در این کنفرانس یک دست نشنیدم، شاید من اشتباه شنیدم. شما شنیدی اینو که مثلا فرصتی هستش که همه چی با هم کار کنه یا
آره دیگه، من اگه یادت باشه یک دو سه نفر اینها راجع به اتحاد صحبت کردن. گفتن ما از اون از اون جزئی و از اون باید به اصطلاح از جدایی و عدم اتحاد باید بپرهیزیم و برای اینکه این رژیم رو سرنگون کنیم به این اتحاد ما احتیاج داریم. اتفاقا یکی دو نفر از این سخنران ها به هر حال بهش اشاره کردن اگه توجه میکردی. حالا صبح من نمیدونم ولی بعد از من
آها که
حواسم.
اتحاده باشه. آره خب آره درسته. شاید من خیلی واضح میخواستم بشنوم. یه چیز دیگه که برام جالب بود این بودش که لیبرا میخواستم حالا اینو مد نظر بگیری، حالا پوینت اف زاویه دید شما رو هم بدونم، بچه دیگه هم که هستن دوستان خوش آمده. ببین میخواستم بگم که گفتش که چرا از بین رفتن این جمهوری اسلامی به نفع آمریکایی است. خب من یکی از دوستام خیلی با هم خیلی در مورد این برین استورمینگ میکنیم، با هم میشینیم فکر میکنیم که یه جوری باشه که میدونی از جهت منطقی به نفع اونا باشه که چرا باید این بره. درسته؟ و من احساس کردم این هنوز این سوال برای اینها با این همه که دلایل مختلف ارائه میشد ولی توی صبح بود به نظرم که باز به نظرم که در این قسمت باید یه مقدار کار بشه، چون که هنوز اپیلینگ نداره و من فکر میکنم شاید هیچ وقت نداشته باشه اون اپیلی رو که آدم دوست داره که داشته باشه، چون که مرزها جداست، زمینها جداست، میدونی نزدیک نیست، خطرش احساس نمیشه. ولی اگه این رو بشه یک محتوای جالبتری به وجود آورد دورش که منطقی، که چرا باید یه چنین سپورتی باشه، چرا این همراهی لازمه، نمیدونم. ولی این رو من احساس میکنم که هنوز اینها اون رو چیز نمیکنه که نه که هنوز منظورم اینه که مثلا کلا این ایدیای این که بخواد بره اونجا رو این و کمک بکنه این رو میدونی باز هنوز ذهنش باز هست واسه پیشنهادهای دیگه که چرا دوستم این اگه بشه روش مثلا کار کرد، میدونی این محتوای جالب میشه.
منظورت اینه که آمریکا میگه چون ما از ایران به اصطلاح فاصله داریم برای سکیوریتی ما خطری نیست برای امنیت ما.
آره میتونه اینو بگه
ولی
دیگه.
نه، ولی
آره
اشاره کرد اگه نگاه کنیم اون ویکتوریا کوت کی بود اون خانومه، اشاره کرد به همه اینها که چطور اینها میان اینجا از پراکتیکاشون استفاده میکنن و اونی که خانومم اشاره کرد حالا کی بود
آره ولی هنوز فکر میکنم اندازه کافی و شاید کلکتیو نیست جمع و جور، میدونی چون که دوباره صبح همین موضوع عنوان شده بود. یعنی این به من میگه که یعنی موضوع جا نیفتاده.
در حال مرجانم گفتش که
آره
اومدن
شنیدم.
توی اون نمیدونم کجای کاخ سفید یه دونه
آره
عکسی
آره
از 40 گذاشتن و که به خاطر شهادت 40
آره خب خودتو بذار
حسین.
جای آمریکایی چی میگه در مورد اون؟ میگه
خب
گذاشتن که
اون میگه که
گذاشتن.
ما اینو میفهمیم، ما مفهوم اینو میفهمیم، ولی یه آمریکایی میگه این خب یه عکس زده اونجا هیچ نمیفهمیم چیه.
راست
میدونی
میگه.
اون ایدئولوژی اینو نمیفهمه. ما باید اورنس بدیم، آگاهی بدیم که آقا این یه وقتی که اینو میگه یعنی چی، یعنی تو باید بشی مثل اون، تو میفهمی، تو تا اونو میبینیش زود آنتنت میره بالا، خون تو رگات میجوشه، میگه آخه این چه آشغالی اینجا.
رایت آره
ولی اون که
آفرین.
ولی اون که نگاهش میکنه افشی زاده اینجا میرن خوب 40 خوب خیلی هم خوبه، تازه ممکنه خودش بره راه بیفته با اینا بره ببینه چه
آره
خبره.
تازه میگه چقدر خوب دیورسیتی تا تکثر
آره
رو میدونی. میره تو. آره راست میگی. راست
چون
میگی آره.
اینه که مثلا میگه ما خواهی بکنیم حسینی، میگه خب خیلی خوبه شما نوروز میگیرید، ما هم از خدا میخوایم که اینا بیان اینجا تردیشنشون رو بیارن اینجا جشن بگیریم.
رایت آی نو رایت دقیقا همینطوره. درسته.
تو باید
آره بعد بلکه شما مثلا آدم باید از سیستم بده که چرا این مهمه که آگاهی بدیم همش. درسته. بعد فکر میکنم اونجا مثلا شاید دایاسپورا نقشش میاد وسط. به عبارتی، یا شاید public education. I don't know.
بابا اینا اصلا توی ونزوئلا الان دارن پهپاد درست میکنن. ونزوئلا جاییه که توی مرزهای آمریکاست دیگه. اینا اگه بردش برسونن به اونجا شروع میکنن به زدن. شما فکر میکنید جمهوری اسلامی اگه بمب اتم داشت الان نمیزد؟ 100%
بله
میزد.
چرا بابا، آره
اصلا
اصلا آخر
قطب
زمان
شمال، اگه
دیوونه
تو
میره.
قطب
I
شمال
know
یه
I know.
اسکیمویی ببینه که کافر میزنش.
به خدا درست میگی، یعنی مثلا روانشون شاده. من که اینطوری میبینم، میدونی. عجیب و غریبه. در صورت به نظر من که کنفرانس خیلی خوبی بود. صبح هم اینو گفتن، من که لذت بردم، خستم نباشم. صحبت شاهزاده رو چی فکر کردی؟
آره دیگه، اون که اصلا دیگه گفتم که دقیقا به مسائل به هر حال خودش برای چیز در داستان جنزی و یا جنس زی میگن، چی میگن، ما دیگه باید بگیم جنوی یعنی ویکتوری، درسته؟ و این دولت گفتش دولت گروگانه به هر حال. ولی خب ببین استراتژیاش درست طبقه بندی کرد. شما وقتی یک سخنران خوبی هستی طبقه بندی داره مایندت. گفت آقا ببینید ما باید چه کار بکنیم، ما این استراتژی ما، این تاکتیک ماست که با 5 تا حد اکثر شروع میکنیم. یکی حد اکثر رو باید بذاریم بر این پرشر آن گاورمنت ایران، تا اونجایی که میشه ما بر این دولت باید فشار بیاریم. این مبارزه است دیگه. بعد از ساپورت بشه از مردم، این حد اکثر باید باشه. دیفکشن یا ریزش یا هر چی بهش میگن، فرار نیروها، ما باید اینو هرچه بیشتر روش کار کنیم که مردم اون ریزش داشته باشه رژیم. و اون قسمت منفیش، قسمت مثبتش این موبیلیزیشنش هست. ماکسیموم موبیلیزیشن، این حد اکثر بسیج خب خیلی مهم هست. بسیج توده ها. بس اگه یادت باشه توی اون نواری هم که مال مهدی نمیدونه امیری بود گوش کردیم، اصلا بحث بسیج توده ها بود. گفت که علت این که انقلاب ایران
آره.
این چیز پیروز نمیشه بسیج هستش، موبیلیزیشن. اگه برگردی دوباره اون نوار رو گوش بکنی میفهمی که چقدر رو این بسیجه و براش پرینسیپال داشت. حالا ما اونجا نیستیم، برمیگردیم اون نگاه کنیم. اون خیلی سخنرانی مهمی
به
هست.
نظرم که اونو باید دوباره گوش بدیم، اون
اصلا
خیلی
اون
صحبت
اکسلنت،
خوبی بود.
آره اون یک
آره اون خیلی
چارچوب
میتونیم از
مبارزه.
خودش هم بخوایم بیاد بهت گفته باشم.
حالا اگه دیگه اونم بیاد
آره
که دیگه اکسلنت دیگه، چون به هر
آره
حال اون بحث میدونی اون داره استراتژی
آفر.
مبارزه جدید رو داره میگه. یعنی دیگه ما اولد فشن نمیتونیم بیایم مبارزه بکنیم. اون اصولش رو حالا ما اگه بیاد ما میتونیم اونو بحث بکنیم. و یکیش هم میگه که خب ما تمام اینها رو به صورت ایجابی هم ما طرح داریم برای شما. آقا ما این پروژه آی پی پی هرچی هست، پراسپریسیتی و نمیدونم پراجکت و این چیزها رو ما داریم براش. و خیلی مهم داشت که من رو اصل این خیلی اهمیت میدم، یکی اون فشار بر دولت باشه و از مردم حمایت باشه. وقتی از مردم حمایت میشه شما میتونید نیروها رو بسیج بکنید و این بسیج نیروها هرچی بیشتر باشه باعث شکست دولت میشه. و نکته مهم این که بهش اشاره کرد مسئله عمل، پرگماتیسم. گفت دیگه دنیا فقط حرف نمیزنه. استرالیا رو مثال میزنه که هم میزنه سفیر رو همه رو میندازه با بیرون میکنه و از یک طرف هم میگه آقا IRGC رو من باید بذارم جزء نیروهای تروریستی. این خیلی خیلی مهم هستش. و نه تنها اون بلکه انگلستان هم الان سخت دیگه به جمهوری اسلامی دیگه اطمینانی نداره. و این ریاکشنی که به اصطلاح مردم به این پروژه شکوفایی دادن که 6000 نفر حالا یا هرچی هست بهش رسپانس دادن، روش کامنت دادن، ایباشو گفتن یا گفتن این کارا رو بکن، به هر حال این داره فیدبک میگیره دیگه. میدونی این هم از سخنرانی شاهزاده رو نمیدونم دیگه.
آره منم باهات موافقم. به نظر من که کلا جمعیاً کار خیلی خوبی بود و اینا. میگم این سخنرانام که اومده بودن واقعا خیلی بود کوالیتی، آدمای معروفی بودن و میدونی سابجکت ماتر اکسپرت بودن، متخصصای درست حسابی بودن و حالا صبحش رو شما نشنیدی، صبحش اگه میشنیدی پس خیلی لذت میبردی. صبحش واسه ایران فکر کنم واسه بچه‌ها که به فارسی گفته بشه چیز خوبیه، برای اینکه میدونی یه ذره لول ست میکنه این این توقعات رو، و اینکه چقدر ما باید حواسمون باشه و روی عمل جلو بریم. خلاصش که بعد صبح میگفت که یه جایی گفت که آره اینطوری نیستش که خب مثلا داشت اینجا رو گوش بده، داشت میگفت که این نیست که فقط شما آلترناتیو بدین. الان گوش بدین، داره میگفت IRGC هم الان داره آلترناتیو میده. فهمیدی؟ یعنی کودتان داره آلترناتیو میده که حتما اون مشتبهه، و اینکه جمهوری سوم هم داره آلترناتیو میده. گفتش زبان انگلیسیه، اسمش یادم نمیاد ولی برات میتونم دقیقش رو بفرستم که من گفتم عجب. یعنی گفت اینو، میدونی یعنی مقصدی که وقتی که اینو میگه یعنی اینکه میخواد توجه رو جلب کنه دیگه، که مثلا وقت استریت تایم نکنید، کارتون رو تموم بکنید. متفقی چی میگم؟
اینها
و
به هر
این
حال ببین یه پروژه هست که این خامنه
آره
ای رو بردارن. خامنه ای دیگه شده پرابلم، هم برای داخل هم برای خارج. اه، حالا هرچه زودتر آدرسشو بدن به اسرائیل زودتر انجام میشه. ببین
نه اینا
اسرائیل
میگن بعد اگه
الان
بردارن، بعد دیگه اون موقع براندازی یه مقدار ممکنه راحت نباشه. اگه برش ندارن بعد بگیرنش و اون موقع دادگاهی بشه، اونجا براندازی ممکنه که مدیریت تر بشه. نمیدونم
ببین
من.
به دیگه این نظامی نیست. جامعه بین المللی دیگه وقتی با یک نظامی کنار نیاد مهم نیست دیگه الان کی باید رو کار باشه. میخواد برای جمهوری چهارم درست کنه. اولا که کودتای نیست، به خاطر اینکه از اول انقلاب نظام کودتایی بوده، یعنی سپاه پاسداران که نظامی هستش. آی چیزم رفت، نمیدونم که الهام رفت. She has an internet problem. حالا نمیدونم کجا رفت.
خیلی بده، اصلا از توی چیز معلوم نیست، باید برم روی لینک خودم بزنم.
آره
از توی هالوی نمیتونم گیرش بیارم. بگو.
میفتی چیه موقع گیر بیاری؟ آره
نه
نه
نه اتاق
میگم.
رو که برگردم بعد برم
آره
توی مسیجم، بعد از روی لینکی که توی مسیج برای
آره
دوستم
میدونم
فرستادم.
میفتی بیرون.
آره
آره
آره.
دارم اینو
خب
میگم که
بگو بگو.
اصلا میگم که دیگه این کودتا کی میخواد بکنه؟ کودتا
Right.
نظام کودتا. شما
I know you're right.
در رادیو، تلویزیون، مسائل اقتصادی همش سپاه هست، همش نیروی
Right.
نظامی هستش. شمخانی نظامیه، این یارو که ما تو مجلس هستش، قالیباف نظامی هستش. تمام اینها رو شما هر کجا رو اسم بیاری نظامی هست. میخوام علیه کی کودتا بکنه؟ مگه ارتش علیه اینا کودتا بکنه؟ که نمیشه. این این از این هست. اینه که اینایی که جمهوری هم چه جمهوری، هر جمهوری میخواد بیاد با کی، مثلا با خاتمی صحبت میکنه، با روحانی، اینا بودن سر کار، اینا امتحاناشون رو پس دادن. دنیا دیگه با اینها کنار نمیاد، عقیده اینها رو خوندن، اینا رو همه رو میان بیرون. فقط یک راه وجود داره، ترانزیشن قدرت هست. احتمالاً بهشون هم گفتن ببین یا دو راه براتون، عین نیروی هسته‌ای اینها. نظام سیاسی هم به این شکل گفته آقا یا میرید خودتون با پیس یا به زور شما خواهید رفت. این دقیقا جریان هسته اینها شده. گفت بهشون آقا یا شما ما جریان هسته رو خودتون جمع بکنید یا ما جمعش میکنیم. الان دیگه 20,000 سانتریفیوژش رو زده، اصلا دیگه داغون کرده همه رو، همین سه تا سایتو که زده. تو تا کی باید 40 سال دیگه پول مردم رو بدی اینا رو درست بکنی؟ این پاسیبله که تو شما دیگه بتونی به این انرژی هسته‌ای برگردی. ولی میدونن اینها فقط که به انرژی هسته‌ای دیگه بهونه است، چون داغون شده. فقط میخوان فقط تسلیمش بکنن. یعنی به محض اینکه
آفرین. آره
به
آره.
محض میدونی چی میگه غرب چجور فکر میکنه؟
نه
نگاه کن.
بگو. اه.
به محض اینکه میگه که من جلوش تسلیمو بذارم و اون بگه آره کارش تمومه، خود اینها میفهمن. مثلا فرض کن یک زمانی روسیه حمله میکرد، میومد ترکمانچای یا این چیزها رو اینجور گرفت دیگه. فقط میگفت که بگو تسلیم میشی، میگفت آره تسلیم میشم. میگفت خب این زمین ها دیگه مال من هست، این مرز من هست، تعیین میکنه برات دیگه. وقتی شما اسم تسلیمو بیاری یعنی هر رو دلت بخوان باید بازی میکنن، کار دیگه تمومه. بحث الان اینه که اینا میگن نه آقا ما تسلیم نمیشیم، ما تسلیم نمیشیم.
آها
این
فهمیدم.
اینا معنی سیاسی داره، میدونی اینا معنی سیاسی داره. این نیست که اون بیاد مثلا من با تو همکاری میکنم خب دوباره اقتصاد راه میفته. نه این خبران نیست. این 40 سال گفته، 46 سال این حرفا رو زدن، به اصطلاح گفتن که آقا این شیطان بزرگ و کوچیک هست. چجور میخوام بیان با این مثلا خود این روحانی اصلا در سطح این کسایی بوده که شعار میداده. شما اگه برگردی به اون سالهای اول انقلاب ببینید این شعار مرگ بر آمریکا رو همینا رو انداختن. مرگ بر اسرائیل. نه اگه به حافظی اینا رو در بیاری تو آرشیوا اصلا تعجب میکنی که اینا چقدر ریاکارن که چجور برگشتن این بر. با خودت میگی که اینا واقعا درست حرف میزنن، درست صحبت میکنن، اینجور صحبت میکنن. اینه که وقتی هیچ راهی برای اینها نیست، جمهوریشون رو انجام دادن، نظام کودتاشون انجام شده، الان هم دیگه هیچ به اینها دیگه اجازه نخواهند داد که دیگه اکانومی اینا درست بشه، به اینا پروژه بدن، به آقا بیا سرمایه گذاری کنیم. نو اینا اگه میخواستن بکنن همون دوره اول ترامپ که به اینها گفت آقا اینو درست بکنید، اونا گفتن ما آمریکایی راه نمیدیم، کارشون تمام بود. منتها زمان برده دیگه. چی میگن افتاد توی این یک به اصطلاح فاصله افتاد که بایدن خوابالود با کل خود اینها اومد توی این پروژه رو یکم عقب انداخت. ولی حالا نزدیک هستیم. ولی شما حالا یک وایس های رو میشنوی آقا نمیشه، مردم هی بلند شدن چندین بار، نمیشه این نظامی. اینا همه شعار، اینا همه خود جمهوری اسلامی، اینا از درون اینها هستن. اگه بری تو این بشنوی این روم هایی که اینا جمع شدن که خیلی جالبه، اینها مخالفین قبلی بودن شدن طرفداران نظام پادشاهی جدید. اصلا تعجب میکنی حرف اینا یه
نه
جور
چی شده بگو یه بار دیگه، شدن طرفدار نظام پادشاهی جدید.
آره دیگه اینا
ای
مثلا
جان.
اون قدیما که میدونی مخالف بودن میگن حالا ما اومدیم به این بر. ولی بحث اصل قضیه اینه که به یک طریق دیگه میخوان این نظام میخوان یکم به قول معروف عمرش طولانی کنن و چیزی دیگه نداره دیگه. شما من بگو چی داره؟ شما چیزی پیش بینی میکنی؟
نه موافقم باهات. من باهات موافقم. من فکر میکنم ببین آره نه من با تو موافقم. چیز دیگه ای نداره، چیز دیگری ندارد. حالا بازم من دوست دارم که یه ذره از آمریکا واضح تر پشتی. ولی ببین من میخوام بگم که به نظر تو آیا ما نیاز به آمریکا داریم برای پشتیبانی؟ مگه اگه آمریکا پشت اسرائیل باشه، اسرائیل با به آلترناتیو ملت شریف ایران که همون چارچوب میدونی تمامیت ارضی و فلان بس دموکراسی و از اینجور چیزا، خب اگر اسرائیل همراه باشه خب دیگه ما چرا باید نیاز داریم به آمریکا مستقیما با ما کنار بیاد؟ بعد صبح داشت صحبت میکرد سر اینکه اگر ماشه بشه یا نشه، پس یعنی ما باید دوباره روی ماشه یه مقدار تمرکز بکنیم تا اینکه این 18 روزش هم تموم بشه. میدونی؟ برای اینکه اونا میگفتن که حالا
آره
مثلا
نه
ممکنه.
دیگه الان گذاشتنش توی برنامه
آره دیگه.
که این
بگو.
آره دیگه ببین چند تا قطعنامه هست، اینا هر 2006 و 2007 و 8 و 10 و اینا همینجوری علیه جمهوری اسلامی به خاطر این مسئله هسته‌ای صادر کردن. هر دفعه اینو شدیدتر کردن و آخرینش که به هر حال 22 23 سال 11 سال هرچی هست دیگه اینو بردن زیر عنوان اصل 7. اصل 7 میگه که منشور سازمان ملل میگه که هر دولتی که بر علیه صلح جهانی اقدام کنه باید علیهش همه بلند بشن، حتی میتونن میلیتری اکشن داشته باشن. اینه میگه آقا شما دولت، شما صلح جهانی رو به هم ریختی. میدونید چقدر حساسه این جمهوری اسلامی رو نمیفهمه. ولی مفهوم اصل به اصطلاح 7 منشور سازمان ملل مهمیش اینه که اصول سال 39 40 41 42 این چند تا اصل از اصول مهمی هستن که جمهوری اسلامی رو میذاره توی پوست گردو و فشارش میده از هر جهت. یعنی و توی آرتیکل 41 حالا یا 42 هرچی هست میگه که جامعه جهانی میتونه از هوا، از دریا و از بای ایر سی ان لند میتونه بهش حمله بکنه و نظامش رو برچینه. کرده دیگه. مگه چه کار باید بکنه؟ به اسرائیل موشک انداخته، به قطر انداخته، به عربستان انداخته، به پاکستان انداخته. ترورهای توی اروپا کلی 500 تا ترور اینا داشتن، میدونی خیلیه. خب صلح جهانی و اینا به هم ریختن دیگه. اینه که وضعیت خوبی جمهوری اسلامی نداره و هزینه شده از 7 اکتبر تا الان که تونستن جمهوری اسلامی اینجوری به ضعف برسونن. میدونی خیلی هزینه کردن. چجور باید بهش اجازه بدن که این دوباره باش اقتصاد برقرار کنن، پول بهش بدن، صنایعش رو بسازه، دوباره موشک سازی بکنه؟ میفهمن که دیگه باید بره دیگه. اصلا با این رژیم نمیشه کنار اومد. یعنی اگه بیان انگار که قتل خودشون رو صادر کردن. میفهمن
دقیقا
ولی خب
آره.
پالیسی رو نمیذارن کنار. میگه ما پالیسی داریم صحبت میکنیم، بذار بره صحبت بکنه، بذار بره مصر صحبت بکنه، بذار بره اینا همه اصلا دیگه بازیه باشه. اینا نمیفهمن. اینه میفهمن البته. گفته
میخوام
برو.
ببینم اصلا توی تاریخش این چیزی اتفاق افتاده؟ یعنی اینقدر آدم خودشو بی شخصیت ببین اصلا روشمندی اینا خیلی وقیح و اصلا نمیدونم چی بگم والا. خیلی
بخور.
بی‌کلاسن، خیلی وقیح هم میدونی. یعنی تو حالا شده مثلا یه ذره مثلا حالا میخواین گردن کلفتی کنی اینا مثلا یه ذره اداش هم در بیارین به خدا. این کاراتون اصلا مسخره است، همه دنیا بهتون داره میخنده. من نمیفهمم این جمهوری اسلامی چی داره فکر میکنه، واقعا چی داره فکر میکنه که جمع نمیکنه بره.
خاطر اینکه یک آدمایی هستن که لات و لوت هستن، بی سواد هستن توی ایران. اصلا اینا رو همینجور اومدن گره. مثلا اون رفیق دوست چه کاره بوده؟ یه دونه میوه فروش بوده. من نمیدونم اون رضایی چی بوده. اینا یک دفعه روحانی مثلا چه کار، مثلا رفسنجانی چی بوده، یا این خامنه. اینا همین توی این دهاتا میرفتن روزه میخوندن، یه آشی به اینها میدادن. خب رسیدن به قدرت، رسیدن به بیلیون، رسیدن به دلار، رسیدن به این منابع نفتی. شما فکر می‌کنید که چی؟ بعد الان دیگه خانواده 1000 فامیل درست کردن. این دخترش داده به اون داماده اینه. یه خانواده 1000 فامیلی بین اینها. این پوله داره میچرخه. اینه که فقط با زور باید بیان پایین. الان البته
ولی
هم
داستانشون خیلی میگم همونطور که داری میگی آدم واقعا خجالت آوره. بگو حالا ببخشید.
دیگه هست. یک واقعیت هستش. این که ما به آمریکا نیاز داریم و نداریم اصلا به ما ربطی نداره. اون کار خودشه میکنه. اون داره آمریکا رو منافعش رو میدونی چقدر اینا.
دقیقا
اصلا
آره.
اینا به
آها.
سفارت آمریکا تو بیروت یه دفعه با کامیون حمله کردن. 278
نه اینا ببین این اصلا میخواد جنگو بیاره میدونی، وگرنه
آره.
آدم نصف عقلم میشه این کارایی نمیکنه. آخه احمق چیکار داری میکنی؟ میخواد جنگ. من واقعا میخوام بدونم دارن چیکار میکنن. یعنی ببین بیاد اسرائیل این دفعه یعنی فلت میکنه مگه میشه؟ درستی حالا به خاطر شاهزاده الان مثلا شاید یه مقدار حرف میزنه کوتاه میاد فلان، وگرنه تا حالا تکلیف ما رو اینا رو معلوم کرده بود. بدبخت تهران یا اون یکی شهرهایی که بغل اینا. یعنی میدونی داره خیلی مراعات میکنه که اصلا کشتار کمتر باشه، نه که بگم نباشه، خیلی کمتر باشه. واقعا داره مراعات میکنه، نه که بگم حالا مثلا چه خوب که داره مراعات میکنه، ولی واقعیت هم داره مراعات میکنه. ولی میگیری منظورم؟ این نمیفهمم اینا پک میکنن. میدونی اینا اومدن یه قومی رو که جنگ جهانی دوم اینطوری قلع و قم شده، خاطرات بسیار بدی داره از جهت نسل کشی. خب الان خودش لابد از جهت روانی نصفش میدونی چی میخوام بگم ضربه دیده نیشنش ملتش. بعد میان شما مثلا اینطوری هی کشت و کشتار. من نمیفهمم یعنی چقدر نمیدونم والا. من طرفدارای این قسمت رو ملتفت نمیشم. طرفدارای یعنی ببین اینایی که طرفدار جمهوری اسلامی ان که واسه مسئله این حمایت از فلسطین نه ملتفت نیستن که چقدر غیر مستقیم شما باعث کشتارای بیشتری میشین. ببین چون که ببین لیبرا اینا اثبات کردن که از جهت قانونی خب حداقل حالا درست یا غلطش الان حالا نتانیاهو اینا رو میبره دوباره خودش رو از اون چیز در میاره اون شکایتی که روش هست، ولی حالا به هر صورت در همون حدم تونستن ازش شکایت کنن، تونستن یا نه؟ پس یعنی در اصل حرکت‌های هاراگیری لازم نبود، اینا از روز اول هم میتونستن برن قانونی اقدام کنن. تو که این همه خرج کردی آخه آدم بی‌عقل، دروغ میگم؟ سالی 100 میلیون میگرفت اون قضیه. خب بعد ما الان مردم خودمون فقیرن، حالا اون که 100 میلیون از UN بگو سازمان ملل میگرفته، چقدرم از ما اندازه همونم از ما میگرفته، مردم خودمون بدبخت فقیر. بعد تازه چی؟ تو اگه واقعا میگی اسرائیل کارش بد بوده، اسرائیل کار اشتباه کرده، که من فکر میکنم که مسئله بسیار پیچیده از هر دوشون تا یه مقدار خطاات کارن، تازه من فکر میکنم فلسطین خطاات کارتره، ولی به هر صورت تو که اگه میگی خیلی خوب میخوای اسرائیل فلان بهمان، دیگه این کارای هاراگیری و بزن و بکش و بچه، یعنی این اصلا من نمیفهمم کسایی که از این حمایت میکنن. من دوست زیاد دارم، بچه ها فارغ التحصیل صنعتی شریف هم. من نمیفهمم بعضی از این صنعتی شریفی اصلا از این دنیا عبور کردن، رفتن از قله با آقا، از اون برم از قله افتادن پایین. به نظرم به خدا این قله ما رو کشت. یعنی من نمیفهمم مثلا به من میگه الهام تو چجوری این بچه کش رو اصلا ما باید میدونیم به این راحتی نیست. این بعد من ملتفتم، من درسته منم، ولی مثلا به این راحتی نیست که تو بگی مسئله بچه کشیشو باید در موردش نشست حرف زد، ولی بخوام بگذرم از این بعد اینا اینطور مثلا نمیدونم والا چی بگم والا عقیدتی میدونی، حالا طرف اونجا میرن اونجا مجاهد میشن معلومه چی ازت در میان، ولی موضوع اینجاست که حالا نمیخوام اونجا هم استریوتایپ بکنم یعنی صنعتی شریفا، ولی کلا تعصباتی، یعنی این کارایی که اینا کردن، کشتاری که انداختن برای چی؟ اگه واقعا میخواستین اسرائیل رو بزنین سر جاش مثلا، حالا توی نراتیو اینا که مثلا حالا با فلسطین بیاد کنار بیاد، مثلا اینا این کاری کردن، فکر میکنید که تا ابده که فلسطین سرزمین داشته باشه؟ اصلا مگه میشه؟ شما با مردمی که نسل کشی براش اتفاق افتاده، منظورم اسرائیلیاست، میای این کار رو انجام میدی توی 7 اکتبر، خاک بر سرتون کنن که انقدر بی‌کلاسی. اصلا همه کاراشون انقدر وقیح، انقدر زشت به خود ملت ایران که هیچی دیگه. اصلا همه کاراشون وقیحه. این رابطهای جنسی خودشون، این اصلا همه جای دنیا به این، یعنی من نمیدونم مردم باید اینا رو زودتر بکنه دندون رو بندازه کنار دیگه. هر چقدر یادت میاد که اون آقای دکتر امیری بود نه لیبرا میگفت که این حرکت بعد یه مقدار سرعتش بالا باشه، درسته؟
آره دیگه آره دیگه باید
میگفت نباید
سرعت
هی
داشته
بچرخیم
باشه.
هی. آره بگو.
اه، ببین اینها این فلسطینی ها خب داستانشون طولانی هستش. اینها به اینها تقریبا وقتی سازمان ملل اپروو کرد 49% به اینها سرزمین داد. گفت آقا بگیرید این 51% قسمت اورشلیم هم گذاشتن بیطرف. حالا چند تا قطعنامه 183 و 205 یه سری قطعنامه اینها داشتن. هر زمان که اینها میرفتن اینا میگفتن آقا ما نمیخوایم. الان دیگه اصلا اینا میگفتن دولت صهیونیستی مثل جمهوری اسلامی اینا باید از بین بروند، یعنی شما اصلا ما
نه میگفت یا
100%
همش یا هیچ.
یا هیچ.
اپروچش
آفرین.
اوکی.
آره این حرف رو میزدن. الان اصلا دیگه امکان نداره نتانیاهو که میگه که من دو دولتی رو دیگه قبول ندارم. سرنوشت غزه مهمترین شهرش هست دیگه که در اون قسمت هستش. این دیگه گرفته دیگه، میگه که 40% رو دارم، الانم که نیروی زمینی رو وارد میکنم. پیشنهادم کرده به اینا، گفته هر کدوم که میخوان برن $5,000 میگیرن تا 3 ماه نمیدونم بهداشت میگیرن، اینجور میگیرن. بعد 10 سالم اگه خواستن برمیگردن، ولی حواسشون هست که دیگه وقت 10 سال وقتی یکی رفیق جایی ساکن شد دیگه برگشتنش مشکله. اینه که اون قضیه که
نه
براشون
دیگه مثلا اسرائیل اون جایی هم که پس نداده بعد از جنگ عرب این بوده که جزو قرارداد بوده که وقتی که اینها سرزمینش رو به رسمیت بشناسن.
آره دیگه.
معتقدی؟
خب
وقتی که نشناختن
نمیشناسن.
اونم لجبازی زیاد کرده، میدونی لازم نبوده مثلا اون توی لجبازی کنه، ولی اونم گفته خیلی خوب حالا به رسمیت نمیشه، حالا بیاین دنبال سرزمینه.
آره
لجبازی
دیگه.
کردن با هم، میدونی؟
بعد جمهوری اسلامی هم چون اینها قرار شد که برن به اصطلاح وقتی که حالا چندین جنگ اینا داشتن 73 و 2000 و اینا هرچی بوده داشتن اینها که برن پشت رودخونه لیتانی. بعد جمهوری اسلامی در سالهای دهه 80 رفت این حزب الله رو درست کرده اونجا. از اون موقع تا الان این حزب الله پدر اسرائیل رو در آورده. یعنی هی میره اونجا اون مناطق شمالی اسرائیل اینا یا موشک میندازن یا حمله میکنن. به هر حال این نیروی نظامی اونجا درست کرده. البته اینو بگم جمهوری اسلامی این کار محوری که درست کرده نصفش هم برای دزدی این سران خودش هست. حواست باشه اینا
آفرین.
همچین نمیدن مثلا این پولو بدن به این عربا. نه، اینا نصفش بردن جزیره خریدن اونجا خونه درست کردن توی این شهرها و اونجا برای خودشون بیزنس درست کردن. اون دختر سلیمانی رفته نکاح خونه و صیغه خونه و اینها درست کرده برای خودش. آخه تو اصلا چه کاره ای؟ تو 2 کلاس سواد نداری، بیلیون ها دلار پول این مملکت رو برداشتی بردی لبنان. هیچ میفهمی آخه چه مملکت شیر تو شیری هست؟ هیچ، همش این نصفش بیشتر اینها هم برای دزدی های خودشونه دیگه. اینا مثلا من آقا از امارات و قطر و استرالیا و انگلستان اینا اینقدر دزدیدن. تمام اون مهاجرانی و اینا همه توی انگلند این ویلاها رو از کجا خریدن؟ هر آخوندی الان توی اروپا و این ور اون ور یک ویلاهای چند میلیون دلاری دارن. تو استرالیا، تو کانادا، تو نمیدونم به جزایر، همه جا اینا هستن. اینها در واقع راههای دزدی خود اینها هستش. یعنی این محور رو که انداختن راه یه قسمتش هم این هستش. حالا اونجا هم یه چیزی پارکی درست میکردن، تبلیغاتی میکردن و اونها هم میدادن، نه اینکه نمیدادن. بعد میای
حالا
به
واقعا
کشور
لیبرا باید با اینا چیکار کرد؟ ببین توی جنگ جهانی دوم، من اصلا نمیگم بکشیم ها، از من مثلا این حرفا خوشم نمیاد، ولی توی جنگ جهانی دوم جنگ شد، خب خیلی هاشون کشته شدن دیگه توی جنگ. خب ولی واقعا با این کسایی که ایدئولوژیشون شسته شده چیکار میکنن نمیدونم. مثلا الان تروریستا که گرفتن تو آمریکا توی زندان اونجا هست که اسمش یادم رفته، بگو اسمش چیه اون که آفشوره یه جایی هست، یه زندانی دارن که مالا که
گوانتامالو.
آه.
گوانت
نه
اسم زندون رو میگی؟
آره
الکترا نمیدونم.
نه نه یه زندانی هست که این تروریست من میخوام بدونم مثلا اینا رو میبرن اونجا آیا
گوانتاناما بی منظور دینه.
آره
اوکی.
گوانتانامو بی. اون مثلا اینا رادیکال زدایی میکنن. واقعا از جهت روانشناسی انسانی چجوری میشه این رو عوض کرد؟ نمیشه ها. فروید میگه نمیشه. فروید میگه 2 حالته، یا از این که شما از روی صلح و خوبی میخوای به نتیجه برسی، یا از روی دوست داری از خشونت به یه نتیجه برسی، و این در یک مسئله زمین ناخودآگاهه. میدونی چی میخوام بگم؟ و کسایی که اون کار تروریستی انجام میدن کسایی هستن که انتخاب کردن یا اینکه زمین ناخودآگاهشون بهشون دیکته میکنه که از طریق خشونت به نتیجه برسن. یعنی مثلا دعوا را بندازه، بدوزه، چه میدونم بکشه، نمیدونم. میدونی اینطوری ایدئولوژیش. ملتفتی چی میخوام بگم؟ تفکرش. نمیدونم اینا رو چجوری رادیکال زدایی میکنه آدم.
رادیکال زدایی ببین شما اگه بری پاکستان این بچه ها رو از همین 5 سالگی میبرن تو این کلاس های قرآن. یک کلاس های وحشتناکی قرآن رو میذارن اینا سراشون تکون میدن. از این آخوندهای اینجوری هم مخشویی میکنن دیگه. مخشویی میکنن. تو پاکستان هست، توی عربستان هست، توی افغانستان هست. مدارس سنی رادیکالیسم خیلی هست که اصلا دیگه یارو کریزی میشه. یعنی مثل این که بهش دراگ دادی همین اسم حسین یا حسن یا علی یا محمد که میاد اصلا حالیش نیست. پس برای چی داره برای یعنی اینا رو آماده میکنن. اونجور نیست که شما به این سادگی نیست. اگه نبود که سال 79 این اتفاق نمیافتاد دیگه. همین یک عده از اینا بودن روشنفکرایی که دنبال خمینی بودن و چادر میکردن به سر و نمیدونم دنبال آزادی بودن و بعد یک دفعه یک روز بعدش دیدن ای داد بیداد اینی که میخواستن این پیر و شیخی که شده بود فرشته یک دفعه از دیوم بدتر شد. این کارو میکنن دیگه با افکار دیگه. اینها همه هستن. ولی الان دیگه تا این نظام فکری اصلا حالا از بین نره کلن این مشکل هستش دیگه. به خصوص مثلا این فلسطینیا، اینا مثلا چه پروداکتی برای دنیا داشتن؟ مثلا چی میکنن اینا؟ شما الان اسرائیل رو نگاه کن، به هر حال یه کشور پیشرفته است حالا برای خودش. مثلا این فلسطینیا چه کار کردن تو این 50 سال؟ اون یک کشور به وجود آورده، این هم یک طرف. شما اینا رو بذار، پروداکت اینا رو ببین چی هست. چی دانشمند تحویل دادن، مهندس تحویل دادن، یک دردی از بشریت اینا حل کردن، فقط آدم کشتن. شما
من
همین
میتونم یه چیزی بگم که پولیتیکلی کرکت نباشه؟ بگم خیلی بده ها، الان بول نگیریم. من تازه فمینیستم دارم اینو میگم. ببین من اکچولی فکر میکنم که مشکل فلسطین زناش ببخشید، من فکر میکنم زنهای قوی نداره. ما ایرانمون فکر میکنم که مردهای قوی داره و درسته زنهای قوی هم داره. مردهای قوی به این دلیل که فرقه شیعه میتونستیم مردا رو اصلا بگن برو ضعیف برو توی خونه حرفم نزن. مرد ایرانی این کارو نکرده. میدونی چی میخوام بگم؟ این فرقه شیعه این کارو میتونست بکنه. این کارو هست که اصلا مرد سالاری و خلاصه دیگه خود من دیگه لازم نیست بگم. اگر یه هویتی در این مبنا بود، خب مردم از خودشون میگن که اینم به نفع من الان همچنان ضعیفه بکنم این خانم رو. درنچه به نظر من توی ایران اول مردها خیلی قوی هستن و زنهای قوی هم داره، ولی توی فلسطین زنهای ضعیفی داره. من اینطوری فکر میکنم. چرا؟ شما کدوم مادر رو میبینین؟ نه جان من، فقط شما به من بگو. من هنوز اصلا من در این تبع اصلا موندم، اصلا ذهنم نمیتونه اینو ایمبریس بکنه. کدوم شما زنی رو میبینی که 12 تا 15 تا بچه به دنیا بیاره، بعد مثلا بچه‌ش رو هیومن شیلد بکنه؟ به نام چی؟ برای چی؟ چی جوری اصلا تو قرن 21 دهه سوم چی شد؟ اصلا چی هستین اصلا؟ چرا؟ کدوم عقده و تنفر؟ مگه اولین سرزمین یا مردمی هستن که بهشون ظلم شده؟ پس مردم ما باید الان چیکار کنن؟ پس الان زنای ایرانی باید یکی 20 بچه پس مثلا بچه کوچیکشون برن بندازن توی بسیج، چه میدونم والا به خودت دست اینا. میفهمی منظورم؟ ببین مشکلش زنه، مشکلش زن جامعه است. زن نصف جامعه است. خب زن خیلی متوسره دیگه، هم خودش که به دنیا آمده هیچی، تازه بگو چی میگه باروری که میکنه، خب بچه بعدی هم اون بزرگ. یعنی در از تاثیر زن در جامعه بسیار بسیار قوی و مدت داره. ملتفتی. و ببین این فلسطین مشکلش زنه. میاد بچه ها رو همینطوری کیلویی ماشاءالله به دنیا آوردن. و اینکه من نمیفهمم اگر از جهت علمی بهش نگاه کنیم کدوم آدم عقل داری 12 تا 15 تا بچه به دنیا میاره، اونم در این زمان. دیگه همه میدونن چقدر سختی به بدن زن وارد میشه، چقدر سخت بچه بزرگ کردن به عنوان یک مادر مسئول. مگه دروغ میگم؟ نه تو رو خدا بگو واسه کی این کارو میکنه؟ مگر اینکه زنه برده باشه یا خودشو به زور برده کرده. یکی از ایناست دیگه. یعنی اصلا مسئله فلسطین مسئله ضد زنیه. من که اینطوری میبینمش. شما این بچه ها رو واسه چی به دنیا میاری اینقدر بچه واسه چی به دنیا آوردی؟ هم به تن خودت که به عنوان زنه سم صدمه زدی، هم به بچه هات نمیتونی برسی. این واقعا اصلا کجای این کار میتونه حتی 100,000 معقول باشه؟ اصلا مفهوم نداره. این جنایت قرن 21 و همه میگن بچه کشی بچه کشی. بهلول من مگه خوشحالم که اصلا بچه کشی کدومه؟ این بچه ها رو تبدیل کرده به اون زنه. این کاری کرده دیگه. بچه که زیر سنشه، که بچه که نوزاد بوده، بعد شده مثلا 2 سال، بعد 4 سال، بعد 6 سال تفلک، حالا مثلا 10 سال با دست اون زن بزرگ شده دیگه. ببخشید اینو میگم، من خودم که البته زنم تو این اتاق، فکر کنم تنها منم. آره نه، ولی منظورم اینه که مشکل اونجاه. میدونی فقط من داشتم با یک استوری صحبت میکردم، گفتم آقا این زنها رو برید دریابید، اینا رو بهشون امپاورشون کنین. اینا لازم دارن که یه مقدار فقط کم هم عقلانیت داشته باشن کافیه دیگه. والا توی قرن 21 اینطوری رفتار از زن من ندیدم. اینطوری بچه اینقدر به دنیا بیاره، بعد نمیدونم حماسی بچه‌هاشو بزنه همینطوری، انگار نه انگار. مثلا چجوری مسئولیت اینها کجاست بابا؟ همون قرآن که بخوره وسط سرتون گفتن مسئولیت نداشته واسه پدر مادر. نمیدونم، من نمیفهمم. من که میگم مشکل فلسطین زنان به خدا، مشکل ما ایرانی‌ها، ما کلا مشکل نداریم. نه، ولی مال ما فکر کنم که ما مردای قوی داریم. به خدا جدی میگم، جدی دارم میگم. اینا ببین فرقه شیعه خیلی مرد سالاره. اوکی میدونم، بله مردای عوضی بله نسبت همتون داریم، ما مردای عوضی هم خیلی داریم درسته، ولی مردای قوی هم داریم که تن به ذلت فرقه شیعه نداده باشن. میدونی با این همه مثلا تمایزاتی که پیش میاد، زنا میاد میفروشه، بعد زنه مرده رو میندازه زندان. ای بابا آخه ما نفهمیدیم مثلا اون مهریه، بعد اون اصلا میدونی اصلا کل ایدیا انقدر باتی من یعنی باید ایران، من فقط میخوام ببینم که انشالله که ما این مطلب رو بتونیم متوجه بشیم که چقدر مهمه که اتفاق بیفته. من فکر میکنم یه روز دیگه میخوام بزنم اون آقای دکتر امیری رو گوش بدیم، یه صحبتی هم در مورد اعتصابات کرده و چقدر صحبت خوبی و چقدر صحبت علمی و خوبی، یعنی همونطور که قبلا خودش صحبت کرده بود همونطوری دوباره بسیار مستند و علمی در مورد اعتصابات صحبت میکنه. نمیدونم خلاصی که همین دیگه، پولیتیکلی اینکورکت هم رو گفتم تمام شد. خب اتاق بندی بریم.
آره ببندین دیگه. نه آخه یه مقایسه کردی بین زنان ایرانی و اصلا شما انقلاب 1401 که فکر میکنی که کی مثلا به وجود آورد واقعا؟ یعنی واقعا اصلا بی سابقه است در تاریخ که این زنها، این دخترها، این چنین شجاعانه، با
خب
اینکه
مردم پشتشون بودن
آره
لیبرا.
بودن، ولی به هر حال ببین ما
درسته
نداریم.
موافقم
مثلا
درست.
اگه نگاه کنید تو اسلام اینا اسید میریختن، اینا هر زنی و یعنی بیشترین فشار رو به این این جمهوری اسلامی آورد، ولی اینها یک دفعه به هر حال این خروش رو کردن. کل کشورهای اسلامی همینجوره، تو عربستان، تو افغانستان هم زنها همین حالت رو دارن. ببین اینها رو از همون ابتدا که میارن همشون میزنن تو سر اینها، یعنی به این شکل میشه. فکر نکن چرا اینجوری هستن، چه فلسطین باشه، چه مصر باشه، چه عربستان باشه، چه امارات باشه. مثلا امارات الان یا قطر اینا درسته یه مقداری لاکچری این برام برشه، ولی هنوز هم همون تفکرات و برو شما ببین زنای اونها چجوریان، همون چشاشون رو بستن و اون رو شما فکر میکنی مثلا مثل کشف و حجاب زمان رضا شاه اینا، نه اینا همچنان اون چادر رو دارن و همون روبند رو زدن و همون تفکر تو مغز اینها هستش. اینها تو افغانستان هم اینجوره، تو پاکستان هم اینجوره، اصلا کل مسلمان ها همه اینجوری هن. تفکر شیعی هم آره از همون قرآن گرفته شده، زورگو هستش، پرایوریتیش مرده، ولی خب به هر حال ما 50 سال سکولاریزم واقعی داشتیم، زنها آزاد بودن، اون خیلی کمک کرده به اصطلاح به زنان ایرانی که درست راه درست رو انتخاب بکنن، و الا همون آشو همون کاسه میشد دیگه، کارش نمیشد کرد که. نمیدونم الهام تلفن گرفت، میخوای ببندیم بریم دیگه حالا.
اوکی من دیگه فکرم که دیگه گذاشتیم این رو، من که دیگه صحبتی ندارم، اگه خودت هم میخوای ببندیم من الان.
نه ببند، حالا بعدا نگاه میکنیم، حالا هر موقع این بحث آمد پیش ما دیگه. من اول ابتدا صبح گوش نکردم، من از وسطاش گوش کردم، حالا ممکنه بخت کنم نگاه بکنم.
آره صبحش هم جالب
مرسی.
بود. آره باش، مرسی دوستان که تشریف آوردین، سپاس و بدرود تا درودی دیگر.